welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Granville Exempted Village School District. Thanks for being here. Would you please rise and join us with pledge allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'm gonna, I don't usually spend much time with the President's welcome. I don't intend to tonight, but I did want, we were just chatting about the, up here about the 4th of July festivities, and, you know, I can't remember a nicer 4th of July with just fantastic parade, carnival, all of the events, and I really want to thank the Kiwanis and all of the volunteers in the community who stepped up and put on such a phenomenal show. It really was fantastic, and it's a reminder once again of what a remarkable community and country we live in. People that volunteer for countless hours to do this, and so I'm really appreciative, and I want to, Fred, if you'll pass along our
Thank you.
thanks.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
and
Thank you.
on behalf of the Kiwanis, thank you to the schools. Let us use the bleachers, house the carnival employees. We really appreciate it. Makes things a lot easier. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Very special. Would you please take the roll?
Mr. Jays.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Dr. Cornman.
Here.
Ms. Deeds.
Here.
Mr. Wolf.
Here.
Commendations?
Okay, this is the portion of our agenda where we get to commend some of our staff and students. So today we have the GHS Envirothon team, who placed 3rd in the state in June and earned 1st place finishes in the aquatic section of the contest. The team graduates only one senior and will be loaded for the state championship run next year. Team members this year are Nathaniel Carlson, Jason Redding, Logan Smith, Lance Van Ostrin, and Andy Hogan. Congratulations, team. Come on up. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Tell everybody, I mean, most people don't know what a marathon is. It's kind of self-explanatory, but it's not. So why don't you guys explain what it is?
You take 4 tests on aquatics, soils, forestry, and wildlife, and then you have to do a presentation as your 5th test.
And what did you guys present on?
We had to make a farm, a beef industry farm, and how we were going to make that better and make it bigger.
Okay. And was that challenging?
Yeah.
There must be some inside jokes because you're
We get locked in a room for 4 hours.
Okay. Enough said. Yeah. All right, Mr. Burnett, do you want to take a picture? 2, 3, 1 more. Great. Congratulations. You are our one and only commendation today. So I wanted to just highlight the fact that the many opportunities that we have for our students to engage in Granville schools. We pride ourselves on solid academics, athletics, and arts. And we also have a lot of other clubs and activities that students get to participate in, all trying to find their little niche that they feel like they're empowered to do something like a beef farm, or learn about aquatics and soil production. So it's phenomenal, and we appreciate all those opportunities our kids get to have to find their niche in the world. So congratulations, team, and thank you very much for the education. Yes. And this is the point in time where if you want to run, you better not. Okay? See? They take advantage of it. Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Jim. See you soon.
I did have a few things to say, but I'll wait.
Coming up.
Staff report.
All right. Next, I'd like to invite Kevin Jarrett, our athletic director, up to the podium to talk a little bit about the Inside Out initiative that has been going on this year with our coaching staff, and I think he's got a little presentation for you.
I have about an 8-minute video that will talk a little bit about the Inside Out initiative, give you some idea of what that's about. And then I have 5 or 6 slides just to kind of bring some things together to talk a little bit more specific about some of the things that we've gone through when we've been in this program and the book, and then talk a little bit about that and then answer any questions at the end. So I'm not going to be too long. I hope I don't put you to sleep and things like that. I don't think so, because it's fairly interesting.
The problem with sports today is that we place value in all the wrong places. We define the value by the scoreboard, by the outcome, by how many scholarships kids get. Sports is now an $8 billion industry, so it's no longer about kids participating on a team or playing for their school. It's become an industry where from the time they're 3 and 4 and 5 years old, they are brought into this culture where they've got to specialize, they've got to be on 4 teams, they've got to play 45 games a season.
Somewhere in the last 15, 20 years, American culture moved to this win at all cost perspective towards sports. And in that win at all cost, it stopped serving youth, participants, families, our communities, and our country.
I think we've kind of all fallen asleep at the wheel. I think we get up and we go through the motions every day, and we've lost sight of the true purpose of what sport really is. And that is the purpose in an educational setting.
Every young person in America is under so much pressure. And I think all these young people are in desperate need for some kind of mentor, some kind of adult to look them in the eye and just affirm their value, their worth, their human potential.
When you read a book like Inside Out Coaching and How Sports Can Transform Lives, you connect with the messages that were shared. You connect with the impact that sports has had on your own life. You connect with the real purpose of what sports can be. The potential of what we can give kids through this experience called sports is incredible. But we have to be awake to it. We have to be aware of it. We have to be conscious of it. We have to be intentional about it.
This isn't some program that we're trying to run. We're trying to create change here. And all lasting and meaningful change starts on the inside and works its way out. The NFL has given us tremendous validation. I know when you invite educators to Mile High stadiums or AT&T Stadium, they're going to come. And when a professional team's behind it, and when that president or some official in that team is making a commitment to support educators within their state, boy, there's an incredible amount of power there.
We're here today for a specific reason, to engage in a discussion about character and its importance in sports. And we hope that after your participation today, you'll return to your districts re-energized to challenge the win-at-all-cost philosophy that pervades our culture.
You know, the great myth in sports is that sports builds character. That's not true in a win-at-all-cost culture. Sports does not build character unless you as a coach intentionally model it, teach it, nurture and develop it.
What we've created is what we're calling the Inside Out system. And it's a blueprint for systemic change. It's a way of looking at sports a little differently from, we can't hang our coaches out there anymore. The pressure of the culture has gotten too great for our coaches to stand alone. And so we're looking at this systemic model: awareness, alignment, action, and then it's accountability. How are the systems in place to hold our communities accountable to that transformative experience for our kids?
Coaches are some of the most influential people in our country, and they have an opportunity to influence kids. They've got a platform to influence kids in a powerful way. The things that Joe Ehrman and Jody Redmond are doing, I think, is really powerful.
Athletics and activities are the glue that get kids to show up to your schools every day. It connects them to being there and having better attendance rates and better SAT and ACT scores. And And it connects them again to those adults who are in their lives that keep them wanting to come back for more.
Joe and Jody were great. Everybody is committed to this character development in every kid, every athlete, and bringing about the highest character possible, that you can through coaching them.
The goal is to win. Every day we're going to show up, we're going to play, plan, and prepare to win. But that is not the purpose. The purpose is the human growth and development of the students who participate in our programs. It is connecting them to caring adults in their academic community and sticking them to their school community. If we aren't aware of that purpose, and if our goals are not in alignment with that purpose, winning becomes the purpose of our programs.
Basically two kinds of coaches. You're either transactional or you're transformational. All of us got to figure out in our own athletic departments, in our own schools, in our own coaching, where we are on this continuum. Now you think what would happen in the state of Texas, in America, if we ever raised up where everybody understood the power, the platform, the responsibility that they have to be transformational in the life of young people.
I realized early on that we really had an opportunity to take the interest and the visibility that surrounds the NFL and surrounds the Dallas Cowboys and our game to do something powerful with it. For us to bring like-minded people together who are really understand their role, understand their ability to reach kids and make that impact beyond the field, and be able to fill up their toolkit so that they can then inspire other coaches to do the same. I mean, this is very unique.
Each of you were invited here because you've been identified as a leader in Texas high school athletics. I'm excited about today, and I'm excited about the potential impact that this meeting can have on.
If you've taught kids how to handle the highs and lows of sports in the right way, and you get down to those nitty-gritty times where it's coming down to those final seconds in the game, those kids that have character development pieces are definitely going to pull you through more than those ones that haven't been exposed to it.
Sports provides coaches with endless opportunities to take advantage of teachable moments, to hold students accountable to a set of expectations. If the value is only defined by the scoreboard, then coaches are going to overlook those teachable moments. They're going to overlook the opportunities to hold students accountable because their livelihood or their value is defined by whether or not they win the game.
What we want to do is create a tipping point in every state where the social, emotional, moral, ethical, and civical development of young people is no longer considered outside the realms of sports and coaching.
Anytime you have an external evaluation group come in, it lends credibility to the effort itself. Is this program making a difference at a systemic level? From statewide leadership organizations down to the school districts, the schools themselves, the faculty, the staff, and then ultimately the student athletes.
We want to make sure that sports becomes this tool to elevate the human spirit of every student athlete to reach the highest version of themselves. You've got to believe in the inherent value, worth, and the human potential of every one of your players. You're not creating better athletes. You're creating better citizens. You're creating contributors to our society and our community. You're creating better moms, better dads, better husbands, better wives, better human beings.
I think teams can win based on character if we as a culture define character as the value that comes through sport.
There's a lot of power in this room, a lot of power, and the power comes from leadership. And what I'll tell you is that power is influence. As we move forward in this character development piece, know that your influence counts.
Every administrator has this incredible opportunity to create a department, to create a cadre of coaches that are going to go out and not only impact that school culture, but are going to impact young people for a lifetime.
We have to broaden our scope of how we define success in this culture. Success is about, are we equipping kids with the skills that they are going to need to be successful beyond the game in life?
Now, while we've talked about this in our athletic programs, as we
The problem with sports.
let me get that off there. Sorry. We've not been in any type of system or systematic way of going about and working with our coaches and talking with our coaches and creating language and those types of things. With the Inside Out initiative, it is an education-based athletics. The Ohio High School Athletic Association is fully behind that and have adopted that, as well as, if you saw there was Texas. I think Indiana's done some things with it, Michigan, Minnesota, and on and on. There's a few more states that are coming like that. So it's a movement that's starting inside in all of our programs and working outward. And the goal is to create better men and women, which although I don't think that we have, like they talk about, that win at all cost here. It's like either we win or we're not going to make, it doesn't I don't know that we have that here, but there are things that we can do and learn from and take that will help our young men and women be more ready and able to give to society and come back and work in our communities. Kind of the timeline a little bit of the Inside Out initiative. In February in 2016 at Cleveland Brown Stadium, there was a meeting that we attended, kind of got the overview of it, talked about some of the things. Mr. Durst and I think J.R. Waite and Chrissy Rogerson went to that one. In February 2017, we went back up for a second meeting, and I think that was just Mr. Durst and myself. The others couldn't make it, and we went back to the second meeting and talked a little about it. In September of that same year, we came back and I bought books for all of our coaches, our head coaches at this point, and began a monthly book study with our head coaches. And we have gotten through, in this past year, the first half of the book, which is basically the background of Joe Ehrman, who the guy with the beard and you saw there, as his background in athletics, from growing up in Buffalo to playing the Little League sports, the organized sports, and then growing up to play at Syracuse University, playing lacrosse and playing football, and then getting drafted by the Buffalo Bills and all those things. So that's what goes on with the part of it there, as he talks about. Okay, and then starting this September, as we get back in school and start our regular coaches meetings, we're going to continue with the second half of the book, which is implementation of the ideas into coaching practice. And it's all of those things that they have talked about there that we're going to look at and we'll be going through. And one of those, when they talk about transactional coach and a transformational coach, is there's some exercises in there that you work on and do, and it kind of gets into the deep part of why you're coaching and what you're doing, and it brings it out, and there's a few things that we do on that and some exercises to go through. But we'll be doing some things in common language. We want to have everybody talking the same word. We want them to have their individual coaching philosophies and what they do based on some of the things, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Phase one of it is a partnership that equips school communities to integrate sports as a valued part of students' education. I think we all know that, and we all agree on that, and have for some time. Whether it's through the GRD at the very youngest level, or up through, the pros have some positives and attributes, but those kind of wane, it seems like it gets to be more of a money thing that goes on there. Phase two is the ongoing professional development and support of the 5-step pathway. One is to teach goals and propose a common language. The second part is to lead coaches through the development of individual transformational purpose statements. That's what we'll be doing as we get into this and start talking about some of the individuals and just why you coach. What are you there for? What's the meaning of it? And it kind of gets you to really think about the things that we do. And as we did this, my statement, since I've not been a coach anymore, but my statement up here that I developed is I lead coaches to become committed and mentally tough enough to develop honest, fair, hardworking athletes who will contribute to the good of our community. So I want them to not be afraid to do this and talk about this as we do that. That's the part of be mentally tough enough, and I think mental toughness is a skill. I think that we teach that in our coaches and in our athletes. But they'll be developing one of those. The other part of that, as we do this, we want to collectively develop one for our athletic program, and ultimately we bring it here to have it adopted to put on our website and on our programs and on whatever that says just what our athletic programs are about be based on what our coaches talk about and what they decide as we do that. So we want to do that and start talking that common language through coaches from sport to sport, administrators, Board of Education, community, and start filtering that way. The next part is what I just talked about, the collective transformational purpose statement. Collectively define success with the school administration and the community. And finally, we want to create coaches and education-based job description. We've already started piecing some of that in with some of the interview questions that we've had that Mr. Durst and I have looked at and done some of those things. So, and then the phase 3, it provides stakeholders a curriculum to develop character and leadership of students and ongoing implementation strategies to assist in maintaining a positive sports culture. So we want to continue doing that. Basically, that's kind of it in a nutshell. I did bring our book. If you would like to take a look at it, some night, whenever you're wide awake and can't sleep.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, Mike.
That's okay. Mike sat here and said, I guess if you're going to talk about, not winning at all costs, Cleveland Browns Stadium is the best place to do it.
Well, we appreciate that the NFL has gotten behind this and have provided their avenues in different states like Texas Stadium, places like that for, we had coaches around Ohio and some from Indiana, some from Michigan, some from Pennsylvania that came to the meeting that we had there. So it's more than just in Ohio. It's a movement all over the country that's starting, I think, to gain some momentum with our athletic departments. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's an item we can use to help build strong kids. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying great athletes. That's not our purpose. Again, we want to do that. We want strong athletes. We want to win. We want to do all those things and plan to do that. But the purpose is to build strong men and women. So,
Kevin, do you see a role for our varsity G students at some point? Obviously they're the leaders of each team and they come together to talk about certain issues. Do you see them getting engaged in this process down the road?
I think as we get through this basic framework of what we want to do after maybe this year, because this will be our second year in it, I think after we get that and we kind of have our groundwork laid about what our coach, when somebody says, tell me about Granville Athletics, and you say, well, here's our statement, here's what we're about, here's what we,
mm-hmm.
and then we can have those athletes that are in that. I think it would be a great thing to do as a study and some work with our league, mm-hmm. and take that out and talk with some of the others. And some of the others are doing this. We met with Maysville, had us down this past spring, and we talked about some of the hardships that were going, we had with this. And the hardest thing for me was being able to get all our coaches together at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And either they're in season or they've got other things, they're outside of the school. So I can't do it during like 7 o'clock in the morning before school where you can come in and then go to class, or try to get them in at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock at nights. They have other jobs or they're working late, so that's been a challenge to try to do that. But I think that with our athletes, we can do some of those things to help that branch out and maybe to spread it through the county and do some of those things. So yeah, I think that eventually would be a great thing for our athletes to do, and part of our summit to do for the Licking County League.
I like that. Thank you.
The GRD has had some great initiatives as well, kind of looking at kind of the philosophy of sports and how it integrates the culture and things like that. It seems like there might be a good way to engage in this process as well.
Well, what I'd like to do is if we can get through this and kind of get this down a little bit and get kind of comfortable in what we're doing, is to have it for parents to come in and start talking about some of these things and see what kind of attendance, or some of the younger parents that are going on, some of our younger coaches, and maybe not younger coaches, but newer coaches to the programs that are in the GRD that played but maybe never coached before or taught. You know, because I think those two, coaching and teaching, are the same thing. I mean, it's just in a different classroom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's wide open outside and sun shining on you, and you're doing the same things. We have we have practice plans, we have goals that we need to meet, we have a lot of the similarities in that. So, but that's what I'd like to see, is we could do some of that and start talking about some of those goals and ideas that we have in this, and how we can help our kids learn to fail and be okay with that, and learn how to handle it when they fail and not feel like they're a failure. Because we've all done it, and I don't think anybody in here is a failure. But that's some of the things that we can talk about and we can do. But this book's pretty good. I'm excited to get into the second part of it, where we're really, we've kind of just been talking about what's going on, how he came to this conclusion about what he was doing, and now it's starting to put where the rubber meets the road, as you'd say, and start putting that into some ideas for each of the programs.
Thank you.
No, Kevin, I think this is terrific. How do you sort of benchmark this as you're looking out, a year, 3 years, 5 years? What sort of objectives would you look at in terms of how you measure this, how you have made it systemic, made it part of the culture?
Well, first off, as I'd like to get our head coaches through the part of it, and hopefully some of that will start to filter and branch out a little bit into our assistant coaches. Then I would like to start with them and get them on board, and then I'd like to look after that, and not that they wouldn't be on board, but just get them through the program part of it. And then I'd like to start with Andy Wildman at the GRD and start talking about some of those things as our coaches go there to give clinics and to talk with them and things, and now they're talking to them the language that we're talking about in our programs with them, the same types of philosophy and
the shared values.
All of those things, and try to do that. So if we can do that in the next 4 or 5 years and get from where we are today, or this past year where we had our 19 head coaches or 21 head coaches, whatever it was, in there and gone through some of this, that we finish up here and it starts to go to our assistant coaches with the support of our head coaches, and then talk with Andy a little bit and maybe try to bring some of that together and have some meetings and talk, and then start bringing parents to the end and see where we go from there. I think we could do that, and I think it would be a great thing for us here to all be on the same page and talking about the same things.
I think we would agree with you. I think most people would. The value of sports, the value of competition is more than just wins or losses. It's the type of people you develop, and I commend you for doing this.
We're trying to get some of those that are not so familiar, I'll say, with the school community as what coaching and teaching is about. I think probably right now 80% of my coaches are outside the school, and have been club coaches or whatnot with those. So we need to do something. We need to get everybody on the same page and be able to try to do that. And this is an attempt, and am I doing it right? I don't know, but I'm trying. I'm working. We started. We got something going, and that's a place. I mean, at least we're there. I could be sitting and, hey, I don't know what to do. It's not, when I can't do that, nobody will show up. I don't get everybody there, but we're doing with what we got, and we're moving along, and we're picking up some steam, and I think we'll have it. And most of the coaches I've talked to seem to have enjoyed at least the perspective of Joe Ehrman. It is more of a football, kind of lacrosse guy type thing. And I know there were some comments on there about on the website and things that had it was, what about girls coaches and women and things? Where does that? It's it kind of. They thought it missed on that a little bit, but I was going to have Coach Rogerson here tonight, but she had to be out of town and couldn't be. But if you have any questions, feel free to talk to any of our coaches. I'd be interested to see what they have to say outside of my earshot about what's going on with it and what they think of it. Most of them have said they liked it and enjoyed what it said, and now it'll be interesting to see how they really like it when we start sitting down and you get asked for 2 minutes, why do you coach? And you have to give a different answer for each time they ask you that. And really, that's part of the getting into why do you coach? Give out all these, because I like kids, because it's fun, because I like sport, because, why do you coach? So, and that's one of the exercises and things we're getting into to kind of barrel down in there to find out where you are. And you find out whether you have transactional or transformational coaching characteristics. And I have both. I've been and seen myself both ways. That transactional where it's my way. We need to do this. No, that's not the right way. And the transformational where you've kind of put your arm around the kid and got him going, looked at him 5 years later and said, man, I never thought you'd make it. And they say, well, thanks, coach. I appreciate that. I did. Appreciate what you did. And that makes you feel good. So, but thank you. If there's any other questions or anything you have, feel free to give me a call. Stop in. Be glad to talk.
Thank you,
Okay,
Kevin.
thanks, Kevin. As Mike's getting set up, I think what Kevin has talked about is whenever you build a system, you start with a shared understanding of what it is you're trying to do and build. And, that's something that we have done on the academic side of the equation through project-based learning and several other initiatives, formative assessment 7 years ago, building that foundational understanding and using that common language, and then building the structures off of that. And so I think he's absolutely on the right road. And again, this aligns with our mission of learning for life. Not just, they won't remember the wins and losses. Some they will, okay? But they remember the emotion attached to the event, and that's the learning. And they will remember the discipline and the lessons that coaches taught them. All right, Mr. Sobel, you're going to talk to us about levy and pay to participate.
Yep, and a little bit of background information
Yes.
as well. Before we really get into the pay to participate or the couple levy options, I do want to address a couple things that have come up over the course of our discussions, both from here and from outside, is why are you spending what you're spending, and where does your spending go, and why is your spending going faster than the rate of inflation? And we're going to address some of that, and then also some benchmarking about kind of what we get for what we spend. And then after a couple of those things, we'll spend just a tiny bit of time on the pay to participate just to go through the recommendation. And then the three options that we limited down to at the last meeting. What I've done is, I know instead of 5-year, now 10-year forecasts of each of those scenarios, so you can kind of see what those look like over a longer period of time than what we've been looking at. This is a familiar slide by now as far as our expenditures. This is our final expenditures for the fiscal year that just ended last week. And you still see about 80% of our spending is in salaries and benefits. Purchase services is now 15%, which is % higher than it's been. And you see supplies and other still very low. And what I want to get into is, what I've done is I've sort of moved even further back than we've looked before. We've looked at a 10-year period of time. We're going to start with salaries. The blue bar is the % change in our salary expenditures, and this is excluding mandated services. And I've broken those out. We'll show those separately in a little bit. And the orange bar to the right is the % change in U.S. average hourly earnings over the same period of time. You see that our salary spending outside of mandates has grown 23.6%, which is about twice the rate of inflation over that period. But what you can see is so has U.S. average hourly earnings. They've also grown at almost twice the rate of inflation. And part of what drives that is obviously inflation, and the second piece, in the private sector, productivity. Productivity is rewarded through wage growth. It's a lot harder to measure productivity when you get to the public sector. It's not like we can be, we're not producing widgets and can produce them cheaper or whatever. But what I was able to do is one measure that is constant, as kind of a measure of productivity, is looking at ACT scores. It's a little hard to look at outcomes in productivity because so many of the metrics have changed over the last 10 years and what's been measured. ACT scores are pretty common.
yeah, they're pretty constant over time. And what you see, the bar, or the line at the top is shown our average ACT score over the 10-year period as a district has gone from 23.8 to 25.6, which is a pretty noticeable increase. But what's really kind of remarkable about that is the orange bars in the middle is our participation rates. Back in 2008, we had just over 100 kids take the ACT, which is probably about 60% of our students. Now, almost every graduating senior has taken the ACT. What you see nationally, and you think about it, makes sense, is usually when you have that big of an increase in the number of kids taking it, your average scores go down. Back in 2008, the group taking it is kind of self-selected. It's the kids going on to higher education and the more advanced, higher levels of higher education. And so it's, academically, it's probably the strongest of your kids. We now have all kids taking it, whether they're going on to community college, a 2-year school, 4-year school, not working, and we've still seen an increase in our scores. And I think that is a great measure of productivity. And the fact that we are getting better results, and basically the teachers have earned the increases that they've gotten, that they are producing a better product than they were.
Is there any statistic on how many times kids take it today versus?
Not that I have, no, I don't know if that's something, Ryan, if you know that.
I just think that's a huge trend that's happened over the last 10 years. Is you had a very small percentage of kids taking it today, kids take it multiple times. And then my question would be, how much do parents pay to have their kids tutored to take the test?
Yeah, I mean, those are all things that we don't really have an answer, we don't measure, I don't think, do we? The other thing to keep in mind with our increase in expenditures, since the 2007-8 school year, we've increased our AP courses from 8 to 18. We're now teaching foreign language in K-6. We've gone from 19 to 29 varsity sports. We're offering all-day kindergarten now, which we were not offering at all back in 2007-8 with additional personnel costs being covered. We've created a couple of new pathways in conjunction with CTEC, and our enrollment has increased by 44 students over the 10-year period. And so even with these additional services that we're providing, which take additional staff members to do, we're still, our spending is pretty much in line with what has happened with average hourly earnings at a national level over the same period of time. And so we are spending more, but we're also doing more, and have more employees to do more things and services that we're providing to our students. When you look at our overall operating expenses over the 10-year period, look at the drivers. Obviously, salaries are the biggest piece, and you see the blue to orange bars on the far left, which is the 23% increase we saw in the previous slides. If you look at the second bar from the right, or the second set of bars from the right, those are our federal and state mandated expenses. Those are basically things that we have no control over. If the service is needed, we have to provide it, and we have to provide it in the way it has to be provided. Those services over 10 years, our spending on that has increased by 105%. It's more than doubled in 10 years, our spending on those items. Our second biggest driver of cost, as we've seen throughout the economy across the country, is medical insurance. Our medical insurance costs have increased by 80% over the 10-year period, and we've taken steps to address that now in the last collective bargaining agreement. None of the changes that we made in the last collective bargaining agreement are reflected in this data. This data is through the last fiscal year that ended a year ago, which is what we can benchmark to right now. The new changes in our healthcare didn't take effect till January 1st. So we would anticipate seeing the impacts of those going forward. You look at the other two areas, the far right is what we would call our discretionary and miscellaneous expenses. We are spending 9% less in fiscal year 16-17 than we spent in 2007-8. That is not inflation adjusted, that is fewer dollars. We are spending less money now than we are spending And you look at our other benefits, excluding the mandated expenses, and those have grown about 7% in 10 years. So again, well under the rate of inflation. I think we've done a good job of controlling costs in the area where we have control over. We're addressing the other areas as best we can. We have no control over the federal and state mandated expenditures.
Hey,
And-
Mike,
Yeah.
over here, can you give an example of a mandated expense from the federal and state government?
It's primarily spending on special education services and mandated state deductions, like for students who are our resident students being educated outside of the district, where we as a district are required to pay those expenses. Those are the two main drivers of that.
So would that include kids that are homeschooled?
No, there's no expense to us for kids who are homeschooled. And honestly, that part there probably does not cover all of our federal and state mandated expenses. They were the ones that are most easily identified and pull out. There are others that are not quite as easily identifiable that we've probably also seen increases. I know one is EMIS, the Education Management System. We now have a full-time employee that is doing that, where 10 years ago that was part of a position of one person, and that is really a full-time position for us to handle, and she probably works more than 40 hours a week doing it, keeping up with all the requirements and data elements that we have to file with the state, as an example. Now, when you look at what we're getting for our money, I've got three sets of comparisons here. On the report card for the 16-17 school year, Granville is one of 23 districts in the state with an A grade for indicators met. And I pulled out three of the main metrics for measuring our spending and our efficiency against the other 22. You look at our average teacher salary is about $4,300 less than in the other 22 districts. Our spending per pupil, even though last year our spending was inflated by the implementation of one-to-one technology and by the large infrastructure project we did in association with the tennis courts, despite being inflated by those two amounts, we're still spending a couple $100 less per pupil on average than the other 22. And really a big difference is you look at our student-teacher ratio, and keep in mind, this is an aggregate. It's total students divided by total teachers. This doesn't mean that we have 16.9, doesn't mean every classroom has 16.9 students for each teacher. This counts across phys ed teachers, art teachers, music teachers, intervention specialists, basically the total number of teachers, total number of kids. We're at 16.9, whereas the other 22 districts average 15.2. And so we have essentially more students per teacher, we're spending less at an average salary that is lower, and achieving what only 23 districts in the state are achieving, and we're doing it more efficiently than the average of the other 22. We're going to look at the same data against 5 high-achieving Franklin County districts that we are constantly compared to. Bexley, Dublin, Grandview, Upper Arlington, and New Albany. We are the only district of those 6 that got an A on their indicators met. You can see the scores of the other districts. We spend about $8,000 less per teacher on an average salary than these districts. The student-teacher ratios are actually the same as with the other group. Ours is 16.9 versus 15.2, and our spending per pupil is about $1,200 less per student than in these other 5 districts, and we are achieving better results than any of those 5 districts are that we're commonly compared to. The last set, and we've heard, well, why can't you be more like the rest of Licking County and spend like them? All of the other 9 districts in Licking County all had F scores on their indicators met, and whereas we had an A score. Yes, our average teacher salary is higher, our spending per pupil is higher, our student-teacher ratios actually are the same as the other districts in Licking County. We're just getting a lot more bang for our buck. And I think you can make a very strong argument that yes, we're spending more, yes, we're paying our teachers more, and we are getting what we pay for. We are getting outstanding results with what we pay for. Any questions about this part of it before I kind of move on to the?
Are those reports in here or are they just online?
I'm sorry?
Those reports?
That this is taken from?
Yeah.
It's all online.
Online.
It's on the Department of Taxation website, or Department of Education website. It's data you can download through the report cards.
I think she's asking.
Yeah.
if these slides
Oh, these
are all on
slides?
the
Yeah.
website.
Or the
Yeah.
slide. I'm sorry, the slides we will put online, they are not right now.
Okay. Thank you.
I think
Sorry.
to also reiterate why we looked at this specific set of data was really an outcome of some of the feedback that we heard during the 4 forums leading up to tonight's discussion around the levy. And most of the information and the questions came in the form of, looking at efficiency within the school district. And one of the things that, we have a continuous improvement mentality around academics and the services that we provide, but we also have an efficiency mentality, and we look at everything with a critical eye as far as how to do it in a better way and maybe a more cost-effective manner. And every time we save money on operations or facilities, we can use that money for academics. And that's been our goal. And I think you see some of the results of that in this data. But all of it is in reaction to questions that we feel that we've had during those forums. And so we wanted to kind of preface the discussion with some of those responses to those questions.
Okay, just a recap of what we have done since the end of the school year and the failure of the levy back in May. 6 staff members have been laid off. Those folks are all no longer employed here. The annual savings of about $400,000 was an assistant principal, communications director, 2 librarians, a bus driver, and a part-time aide. We have had 2 aide positions that have become vacant since we implemented the changes. Those have not been replaced. Those are being filled by existing staff members at about a $50,000 annual savings. And then the bottom part of this is, really to avoid additional reductions in our staff, and that we've talked about is implementing both a change to the high school activity fee and also implementing a pay-to-participate athletic fee that are going to generate together about $180,000. Again, that probably saved 2 positions from having additional positions from having to be eliminated to meet the reductions that we needed to make to get our budget where we needed to be given the failure of the levy.
So, Mike, it bears repeating, because I've heard from 2 different members of the community in the last 2 weeks, people that I would consider to be fairly well-informed individuals within the community, long-standing residents who are active in community activities, who have separately said to me, school district wasn't being honest with us, you didn't lay anybody off, those layoffs don't take effect until January. Nothing could be further from the truth.
If anyone can go upstairs right now and see the empty cubicle where our communications director used to be.
Those people's jobs were eliminated, and they're no longer on the payroll.
Yep.
And I want to make clear, we weren't happy about that. We think there are long-term repercussions to those cuts, but those cuts became effective at the end of the school year.
The pay-to-participate recommendations, what you will have 2 action items that are on the agenda tonight. One will be to increase the high school student activity fee from $50 to $75, and we are really going to rename it the non-athletic extracurricular fee, is to cover the cost of extracurriculars that are not of athletic nature. We are going to rename the middle school one as well. We are not recommending that fee be changed recommending that we implement a fee of $200 per high school sport, $150 per middle school sport, with 2 caps. A cap on both a per student basis at $400 in the high school and $300 in the middle school, and then a family maximum of $1,000 across both buildings. So that essentially there's not going to be more than a $400 charge for any individual student nor $1,000 for a family unit. And those will be the recommendations. Again, you'll see 2 action items on the agenda tonight that we are recommending based on the dollar amounts that we need to raise in our budget.
Mike, what drove the renaming to a non-athletic extracurricular fee? It seems like a little bit of a mouthful, and I'm not sure it's more clear than an activity fee.
If anyone has a better name for it, they're welcome to substitute a better name. I think the idea was that to separate out that the extracurricular fee that's for non-athletics that are paid by every student, whether in high school or middle school, is to cover the costs or a portion of the costs of providing non-athletic extracurriculars. Some of those things affect all students, like student council and student government and things like that. Others are, clubs that if we put individual costs on specific clubs, there's a real good chance those clubs would cease to exist because of the cost would be prohibitive.
Do we have to track with separate accounts these separate fees that come in and what they go to ultimately, right?
No, we do not have to. All the money comes in and goes into the operating budget.
Okay.
So no, it's first of all, it's easy to track because most of it's done through pay for it anyway, and so it's easy to track. But we do not have to keep this separate. It's not. This is all general fund money, so it just goes into the operating budget, just as what this is. The money is essentially covering a portion of the costs of the stipends for our staff members who are the coaches or the activity advisors. Just like that comes out of the operating budget. So there's no exact tracking of the money that has to be done.
But every kid pays it, right?
Yes.
The activity fee.
The activity fee, yes.
It's just a little confusing. We had an activity fee,
So
and now we have a
it's-
high school student activity, non-extracurricular.
Yeah, because I think the misnomer is, well, if my kid doesn't participate in any extracurricular activities, I not then assess this fee.
Yeah.
So I would just leave it as an activity.
Yeah, well, I kind of agree that if you say like, oh, it's a non-athletic extracurricular fee, like my kid doesn't do non-athletic extracurricular, I don't have to pay that, right? I think if we just have an all-student activity fee and a pay to participate, if there's some other reason why it's confusing or whatever, I'm kind of curious where that came from.
So the recommendation actually came from the athletic boosters, and said,
Why couldn't we do that with the athletic fee, just roll it into
Jim,
the activity fee?
hold on. Okay, so the recommendation came from the athletic boosters to try and clarify, because a lot of the secretaries get questions about what does the activity fee cover?
Yeah.
And we're bifurcating the actual fee structure, so they thought, is there a way to better explain what it is that people are paying?
Yeah.
So that was the rationale, that was the catalyst for, if you don't want to change the name, you don't have to change the name, as long as we can explain what people are paying for, we're fine with it.
Yeah, that was the main reason for it. And I was having trouble coming up with a good name for it, and so I just sort of left it at the most descriptive I could, for lack. It's not something I want to put in a marketing campaign, but I'm certainly open. I'm sure we're open to calling it something else.
Okay. I think the pay to participate fees can be pretty clear.
Okay, the last 3 things I want to go through, these are 10-year forecasts. You've seen 5-year forecasts of everything. These are the 10-year forecasts of what each of the 3 options are going to do, with hopefully a little bit clearer description in the titles of what the options are doing. This first one is a 1% earned income tax, 2.33 mil reduction of property taxes, primarily through through not renewing the PI levy. What you can see in here, and keep in mind, this is, you know, when you start getting out 5, 6, 7, 8 years, this is just trending. It's trend spending and trend revenue. It's a little hard to forecast what might happen in 2024. You know, it's a little hard to forecast what might happen 3 weeks from now. 2024 just made it a little bit harder than that. What you can see is based on the trend forecasting, if you look at the second line from the bottom, is under this proposal in the 22-23 school year, we would be receiving still a little bit more money than we would be spending from the, in total. We'd start spending more than we are taking in, beginning with the 23-24 school year, and start drawing down the balance. But again, under these projections, and keep in mind that this is, you're talking 9 years from now. Keep in mind that $100,000 change in 2019 is $800,000 out here when you get through compounding. So you get a lot. Yeah, I wouldn't put tons of, you know, yeah, come looking for me in 2027 and ask me why that number wasn't right. But it gives you an idea that, you know, an option with an earned income tax at 1% gives us some long-term stability. Before we would have to even think about looking for new money, we would peak out at a cash balance of about $9.5 million under these assumptions. Keep in mind, this is with no changes to our current spending. So there would be no, you know, this means we're still going to be charging to the athletic participation fees, the activity fees. We're not going to replace it, you know, bring back any of the positions that were eliminated. If we continue having growth of enrollment beyond the next 2 years, where there is some assumptions for staffing, for enrollment, there's no additional folks there. I know people have wanted us, you know, potentially having a school resource officer or additional psychologists or counseling. None of that is in here. There's no need, you know, assumption that we may have a catastrophic capital event we need money for. This is basically our what we're current spending and trending outwards. And so, you know, there's obviously room for variation in here. Could it be higher? Cash balances? Yes. Could it be lower? Yes. You know, we're talking a long time from now. And that's going to be the case you're going to see in all three of the options, is that it is a current spending trending with no changes in what we are spending money on.
Mike, did you, in the expenditures, and we talked about this during the last levy campaign, about the capital expenditure needs versus what's in the PI budget. Does this reflect the capital expenditure
Yes.
needs that we forecast making over? So it's $1.5 million roughly.
There is implicitly in here, I just to avoid confusion, I have taken it out. There would still be a 2.75 mil inside millage swap that would generate about $1.5 million a year permanently into the capital budget that would grow with inflation.
So it allows us to.
So it allows us to meet our needs.
Devote the resources based on the 20-year
Correct.
plan that we have.
It will let us meet our ongoing needs. It does not provide us with the cushion if we have a major unexpected event that causes a large expenditure. That would be what some of the cash balances that are being accumulated here would be able to be used for, is if we had to go through, like we did last year when we had to replace the roof that we weren't expecting. We're now with these assumptions, if we have a $500,000 or $700,000 unexpected capital need come up, this would give us the flexibility to deal with that without deferring our other maintenance or using some form of debt to pay for it, which we also had to do. We did with part of the roof costs, as well as we built that into our lease purchase to be able to afford to do that.
Thank you.
This assumes that the income tax keeps going.
This assumes that the income tax, which I think we would recommend if we're doing, we do it for 5 years. It assumes that it's renewed after 5 years at the same level. It does not assume it goes away or is increased. It's assuming, again, in this case, it's assumed that it would generate at a 1% rate per year on earned income in this example. The second is a 0.75% on all income, again with the 2.33 mil reduction in property taxes and no renewal. And you actually see a very similar outcome in the 0.75% on all income as we did on the 1% on unearned income. You see, again, the 22-23 school year will be the last year that we are bringing in more money than we are spending. If we peak, the cash peaks out a little bit higher, a few $100,000 higher under this than under the 1%. We begin bringing down that balance, but again, with trend spending and trend revenues, we end up again around $4.5 million of cash 9 years from now. So again, it gives us a much longer sustainability with this option as well. And again, the same assumptions of no changes in our spending patterns. And then the third option is a 6.5 mil property tax with a 0.85 mil reduction of current property taxes. This does assume the renewal of the PI levy. They would not be done at the same time. If we place this on the ballot for this November, a 6.5 mil tax, the idea would be that in May we would come back with a renewal of the 1.7 mil PI levy. There's less of an there is still an inside millage swap with this. It is less than 2.75 mils because we're still going to have the 1.7 PI levy, so we don't have to swap as much, but we would have to swap a little bit more than the otherwise because now we're going to have a partially growing source of revenue in the PI budget, not a fully growing source, and so we need a little bit more millage to offset the fact that it won't grow as effectively as the other will. Here, you see the big difference here is that with essentially a net 5.65 mil increase with the inside millage swap we'd be doing, we would actually peak out a year earlier in our balance at a lower level, about $8.4 million. And because of the lack of growth of the property tax, that we will start spending more than we're taking in, and it will move at a more rapid rate because we don't have the growing revenue source like we will with income tax. And you can see that this, now we start running into more critical problems several years earlier than we would with an income tax option. And again, that is primarily because of the lack of growth from a property tax relative to an income tax.
Yeah, but it seems like we'd actually be back on the ballot sooner with either of the income tax options, potentially, because we're gonna be back on in 5 years for sure. With the property tax one, sort of could be more.
We would be back on the ballot sooner to renew the tax.
Sure.
We would be back on the ballot sooner, in this case, for additional money, because the assumption would be that this will be, if it's a property tax, it would be done for a continuing period of time, not 5 years. As we have done traditionally with all of our property taxes in the past.
And it would require an additional ballot issue for the PI.
Correct. It would require
at that time as well.
Issue for the permanent improvement levy next year, because at this level of tax, we cannot afford to let the PI levy go away, and it actually doesn't make sense to let the PI levy go away because with new levies, new property tax levies do not get the rollback and homestead or the rollback rather reimbursements. And so it wouldn't make any sense to replace a property tax that does get rollback with a property tax that doesn't get rollback. That's just needlessly putting additional burden on our taxpayers that there's really no reason to do. Just a couple final points. getting back towards the value of what we do, last year, Granville students accepted over $5 million of scholarships to advance to higher education. The other thing of interest is if you go back 10 years, back to the 07-08 school year, our state aid has increased $186,500 from where it was 10 years ago. Yeah, keep in mind our federal and state mandated spending has gone up almost 1.8 million. And so the state has covered about 10% of the mandated costs that we are now incurring that we were not incurring 10 years ago, meaning the rest of that is coming out of the pockets of our taxpayers.
Thank you, Mike.
Questions? Okay.
It's a great story. Last bullet point of it,
So I am going to be very brief in talking about, in our last meeting, Mr. Durst came and talked a little bit about the middle school and high school handbook recommendation changes. And just to review some of them, and we had some conversation as a board about some of the things that you weren't comfortable at that time. So from an academic standpoint, we are adding successful completion of the Global Awareness Project to the graduation requirements. That is just aligning our handbook to our current practice. The senior project and the Global Awareness Project is a requirement for graduation at this time. Code of conduct, there was some concern about linking the tobacco policy with the substance abuse policy, and so we are planning on keeping those separate. But we are going to add in tobacco or nicotine products and / paraphernalia, and then the definition of Ohio Revised Code, drug paraphernalia, will be listed as well. Again, Mr. Durst referenced the empty jewel pods that are being found around the middle school, high school campus that would allow us to intervene and talk to students about those items and allow us to render consequences. It would keep the in-school suspension, but increase the penalty from 5 days reduced to 3 for the first offense, and the second offense is 5 days with no reduction. And both of them have a tobacco cessation aspect to those consequence reductions or those offenses. In addition, add in loss of parking, off-campus lunch privilege, and early and late arrival privileges. And those would be for 45 days for the first offense and 90 days. Right now, those are end of the semester language related, and now we're changing them to a 45-day and 90-day period. So we're trying to beef up a little bit of the code of conduct around these incidents that are starting to increase in the high school. And then we had a lot of conversation about cell phones. And our current policy is listed as 26. We have included, actually it should be turned off. Turned off would be silenced during the school day as to not interfere with the educational process unless specifically instructed by the teacher. Again, with the additional Chromebooks that we've purchased, a lot of the work that is doing from a research standpoint is done with Chromebook. And so before we had to bring your own device, and a lot of the devices that kids brought were cell phones, and that became difficult to manage what kids were doing on those cell phones. This is the ability to manage it a little bit more specifically around, okay, if a teacher says, this class period, keep your cell phones out, or, away, put them away, they can do that. If they want them out and allow that, that's up to them. But again, it's giving the teacher the power to manage the cell phone usage in their classroom, whether it's from an academic standpoint or a conduct issue standpoint.
I think that's the key thing, and I hope we can arm our teachers with some kind of education. And I'm not sure what best practices are or how we educate our own kids about, appropriate use and so forth, because I think this is a thing that's coming, I mean,
Well,
kids are
and
gonna have cell phones, we gotta.
The comments I think both Dr. Corman and you made were around the fact that this is our reality, so it's about educating students about how to deal with it, not just necessarily taking them away. but really, when is it acceptable to use the device in an academic setting and then some other social settings. So we've kind of revised these. The other item is the laundry list of OSBA policies that I referenced earlier in the first reading. And in review of that first list, I would actually remove the evaluation policies because we had already done an update to our evaluation policies that aligned with what the change was, so we didn't need to add those. All the others are really just references to some type of legal reference change. There was a reference in about 7 or 8 of those policies to the fair reporting standards at the federal level. That's now been removed and not necessary, so that had to change all those policies. So most of them are just related to reference, Ohio Revised Code or federal references. So that's what you will be voting on in the action agenda. Any questions about this? Mr. Durst apologizes that he could not be here.
So the only change from what's on the screen is that turned off is it is
Silenced,
silenced.
yeah.
Okay.
We don't want phones ringing during the instructional period.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, do we need this anymore?
What?
Do we need this anymore?
We should, unless everyone wants to see anything.
Sure,
Again, from
discussion.
the presentation during this, so if you wanna leave it up for now.
Yeah.
I can get it at the end of the discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now at the point in our agenda where we open the floor to public comment. If anyone would like to step forward to the podium, state your name and address. Please limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Feel free to comment on anything that's on your mind that's relevant to what we do in the Granville schools. We welcome those comments.
Good evening, the Board of Education, President. Just 2 things. I am a new member of this community. I've been involved in 7 different districts in my
Can
county.
you state your name and address?
Rick Tyson, 341 Shannon Lane,
Thank you.
Grandview 43023.
That's okay.
There's a couple things I'd like to speak to briefly. Number 1 is whether it's an activity fee, a pay to play. I'd like the board to consider the resolution tonight of 10.03 and reduce that family amount down to $750 as a max. And also take a look and perhaps postpone this for another month so you can speak to it. I think with the obvious tax increases coming, this is also going to hit community members hard. Doesn't affect me. I'm a former Division I athlete. I was one of those kids that hung on in elementary school who got better because I had that opportunity when my parents didn't have a lot of money. So I would like that consideration just to be given, have a discussion amongst yourselves. The second thing I'd like to speak to is I certainly want to see the Granville schools continue their excellence. The levy that will go on the ballot soon. I still would like to see what that 6.5 mil amount will be per 100,000. We haven't seen that yet. We talked about that in some forums. So as we move forward, I'd like to see what that effect, if that is the option that we have, that what would it cost for a 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 home? Because our property values are important to us. And lastly, regarding one of the slides, I've tried to always be active in my community, and one of the things that I would urge the board and the levy committee to not get caught up in this letter grade fiasco. I think it's great that we're rated that high. If you think that New Albany's at a D and Dublin's at a D, having lived there, I think you're out of your mind. There's been a lot of discussion about it. And I don't think any school district, if you polled the 500-plus districts, that they have a lot of confidence in that particular system. You're not dealing and able, there's special education needs that are far exceed in other districts that they get penalized for. So as we move forward, I would recommend that we certainly tout all the great things that happen here. But again, if you think Dublin and New Albany is a D, and if you have that much confidence in the grading system, then I would suggest you start looking at, dig a little deeper as I have, into all the factors. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Go ahead and step to the podium.
Yeah.
I will tell you, we don't, typically we invite your comments, as opposed to a back and forth. The board will have an opportunity to respond during our comment session, which is next. But if there are questions you want to pose, they may be things we can discuss during our board discussion.
Okay. Jim Green, 65 Denison Drive. The question I have is, did you guys look at possibly including the athletic fee into one fee as a activity fee as well? So you have one fee for everybody to pay. So if I don't have a kid in steel drums, yet he plays or runs track or baseball, I'm not having to pay for him, not having to pay for steel drums if he's not doing that. So it would just be one fee that's shared amongst the community. The other question I have is how are the athletic fees going to be collected? And is there a drop dead date for the coaches to manage? So if I have kids come out, which were traditionally a no-cut sport, 3 weeks in, do I have to say, okay, this is when the fees have to be paid? Or, is the kid going to go after a month and a half into the season, go, yeah, you know what, I'm not really liking it, so can I get my money back? So those are some of the challenges that we're going to run into. I think the other thing too is the middle school fee is too high, because their season is so much more limited, and their opportunities to compete and participate. It's such a shorter season for most of those middle school sports that I think you'll lose a lot of the kids coming up through the programs. So I think that's going to be a deterrent. Like the gentleman said before, he may have not been the best athlete at that time. And we see that a lot with the middle school kids where, they're just trying to figure it out still. And many of them are dual sport athletes where they're playing a club sport, a private club sport, through whether it be soccer or lacrosse, but they can still come out and participate in track. You know how that goes. We still make time and room for those kids to go ahead and participate. Those are the kids that we're going to end up losing that may benefit, because at some point they may get cut from that club, or that club may not find a place for them, and they weren't able to develop as a student athlete. So.
No, I think that's a concern that we all have. We don't want to discourage kids from participating.
Yeah.
Taking what Mr. Jarrett presented earlier, we think there's tremendous value in participating in any of these organized activities, whether they're extracurricular activities or athletic participation. There's tremendous value in that, and whether you're the star performer or you're struggling to stay on the team, there's a benefit to that, and we know that kids do better when they're in those activities. And so trying to find that point where we're not imposing something that discourages participation, but yet recognizes the economic realities that we're facing. Because the alternative for us was laying off more people, and adding these participation fees allowed us.
Yeah, I just want the participation fee to be fair, and I've had kids in music and in athletics both at the same time, and it seems like the athletic end seems to get the short end of the stick a lot of times. So, you know, there's a lot of different things that go on with that. So, you know, there's exceptions made for other activities that aren't given to the student athlete. The other question I have too, and Fred mentioned it last time we were here, is the hardship cases that you may come across. I don't know if you've set up parameters for that or what that may be, but he mentioned that the boosters in the past have picked that up and probably what they would do as well this time. Is there a legal reason where we could just look at it and go, the kid's got a hardship case, he just doesn't have to pay? As opposed to going to the boosters and saying, hey, give us $200 or $400 for that kid.
I don't know that there's any legal reason. There may be just, frankly, how do we make the determination about who can pay or not? Are we talking about?
Well, you're going to have to make that choice anyway.
Right.
But what I'm saying is it necessary legally for somebody to have to pay into the fund one way or another?
So typically, the way that we reduce fees is through free and reduced lunch applications, which is a federally run program, and we use that as kind of the barometer for hardship.
Mm-hmm.
And if they meet that, then we can waive. If they're having a financial hardship based outside of that, that's where the boosters can come into play.
Okay, so you could actually waive it for a hardship case.
Yes.
And then if there's something beyond that, go to the booster.
Yes.
Okay.
And in the past, when we've offered it, we just want to know the amount.
Yep.
Yeah.
We don't.
They don't know the individual.
We don't know the individuals. We don't want to know the individuals. Just, it normally comes through the athletic director's office.
You can't legally know the individual.
Yeah.
Right.
From a FERPA standpoint, you can't legally know who they are.
Yeah.
How do we identify those? You mentioned the free lunch program, but beyond that, how do, is that something the coaches need to identify?
Usually that's something that's reported by the parents or the student.
Okay.
That will be probably, yes, through the coach. Some of these logistical questions come after the policy is passed. And,
Well, I think it's something y'all need to.
oh,
think about.
we've thought a lot about them,
The
but
logistics of it. 'Cause
yeah.
August is right around the corner.
Mhm.
So.
Many school districts have pay to participate fees, and we will administrate it similarly to some of those other school districts with some nuances for our population. But again, getting the handbook language done, getting the board approval starts the clock for getting it into all of our communications.
Yeah, and the other thing, we've got to make it known, because I think a lot of people are expecting it next year, and at least the interaction that I've had with parents and coaches, it's like, well, that's going to happen this year. It's like, yeah, it's going to happen this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Mullins, 103 Fairfax Court, Granville, Ohio. A couple of things. Mike mentioned that the rehiring of teachers will not happen if the levy passes. What about pay to play? Will that eventually go away? One question.
I didn't say, yeah.
What he said was in the assumptions
Okay.
for that, nothing was added back in. So what is our current state of employment is our current state of employment in that scenario, and pay to participate would continue at the same level as we're discussing as well. Yep.
It's a little frustrating that we have a levy coming up and there aren't very many people from the community here. So with that being said, if it's a November ballot, and even if it's a May ballot, are we gonna continue to have levy forums so that we can educate our community and make sure they do understand people were fired, people were let go, not fired, but people lost their jobs? Something I thought would be beneficial to add to educating our community. My husband just received AP scores from his English classes, and he did a little bit of data. And I had to text him because he's in a swim meet with our son. Over the last 9 years for a public education, those students who have passed English and his English AP test, they've saved over $500,000 for college tuition. If he used Denison's cost-based tuition for the private sector, and it's $1.2 million. So those students that are taking AP classes are also benefiting by not having to take classes. So those are big numbers for just one class, but can we also do that for all the other classes at the high school? Because that's big money. What else? There's something else. I think that's it. And he didn't want me to share, and I said, give me your stats.
So, Russ, if you would, can I respond?
Sure.
To a couple? Okay. So, once a ballot is voted on by the Board of Education, a committee does get organized and start to put together communications on behalf of the Board of Education and administration. That will be happening ASAP to try and get information out. And I do believe, sorry, the sun's right in my eyes. You know, the intention is to have multiple forums, probably one a week, where people can come and get informed around this issue and what the board has promoted. On the issue of AP, I can tell you as a parent who sent a child to school that was able to pass out of many courses and was able to, you know, potentially graduate early because of the credits that she walked into IU with. Now we're choosing to have her do an internship, but which will keep her there. But I know Mr. Janice also had that same situation with his oldest. So we absolutely see the benefit. And what we were talking about in the highlights was just scholarship dollars earned. AP is a whole separate category that also adds significant value to the student's experience. So point well taken.
And your point about the community involvement is critical, obviously. You know, voter turnout was 36% in the last election. And we held, the levy committee and folks who spoke held over 40 events to speak to the community. There won't be any lack of effort by the levy committee or the administration or anybody else to put the word out, but we absolutely consider it imperative that we engage the community on a deeper basis and bring more of them in. Because as evidenced by the points that you made, by the points that were in Mr. Sobel's presentation, there's tremendous value in what is produced in these schools. You know, there's no way around it. Great schools cost money, and we do a fantastic job here. You do a fantastic job here for an amount of money that is less than what's spent elsewhere. Any other comments? Anyone would like to step forward? Thank you for the comments. We appreciate it. We value them. We welcome them, and we would like to have more of them. So with that, we will then move into board discussion, and we can frame up the discussion tonight. We have on our agenda 3 resolutions which we can vote on. The 3 resolutions which Mr. Sobel outlined in his presentation, the 1% earned income tax, the 0.75% all income tax, and the 6.5% property tax.
Bill,
6.5 mil, thank you, property tax. The timing is important because if we intend to be on the ballot in November, we need to approve it tonight. The key to November, in addition to the fact that you know, the way we run our business is to try and budget appropriately for what we plan to do in the coming years, and so we'd like to have a good sense of where we're going and what we can budget for. But the other key to November is, frankly, if we went the income tax route, This is the last year we can get that done in order to make it work. If we wait until the spring, until May, the only option available to us is property taxes, and that's really just a function of how the income comes in on that tax structure. It doesn't come in soon enough or early enough in a real estate, an income tax collection to be able to support our budget. So if we wait until May, we have one choice and one choice only, and that's the 6.5 mil property tax. That's really why the timing is a key portion of our consideration tonight. So with that, I will open it up for discussion, comments.
Can I
please
make one comment before your discussion? I want to highlight the fact that after the levy loss, this Board of Education said, we want to hear from the community. You offered multiple opportunities to hear, because there were several things promoted during the levy campaign, that there were different and better ways to do some of the work that we're doing. And you said, we'll keep an open mind, come and share those thoughts with us. There were a lot of ideas shared. A lot of them we're still working on, but they don't address the short-term and long-term needs of the district. And so we will continue to talk about economic sustainability with the community. We will continue to be as efficient as possible to maximize the dollars going into the into the classroom and our programs. And we will continue to explore ways to bring resources to the district that have minimal cost to the taxpayer, like CTEC and those options. So we are going to continue to do those out-of-the-box opportunities, continue to look at healthcare, continue to look at all those things through the collective bargaining process. But those are not something that will address our short-term and long-term needs immediately. So I applaud the board for having those conversations, and I applaud the community members who showed up and gave their feedback. And you heard through our presentation some of the things that we heard through those opportunities. So I commend you for what you've done. Now you have the difficult decision to, figure out what is the best option for our schools moving forward. And the good news is like we've said, we have a great product, no matter what metric you look at. Okay, and I agree with Rick that the metrics that we have, flawed as they are, they're the only metrics that are widely distributed and used across the state, so we reference them. But we have a great product in Granville Schools. We're proud of it. We have a lot of opportunities for our students, and that's a benefit to our students. And so what we need to do now is find something that will be a long-term strategy to fund the schools so that we continue to offer what we're currently offering. And I think we have some options that have a lot of positive aspects to them. So have at it. Have a good discussion.
Just two quick questions. You had mentioned that in May our only option would be a 6.5 mil. Is there a chance that actually that could be even higher if we go in May?
We would have to look at it again, because the problem, what I showed was assuming it was in November. If it's not till May, we lose a year of collections. And so we might have to, at 6.5 mils, that means, and we wait a year, we're coming back sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Or we use a little bit higher millage rate to extend it further. There would be a trade-off between the length it's going to last and the millage rate that gets magnified waiting till May because we lose a year of collections.
And with the changes that we made in our budget, would that give us any flexibility potentially to do an income tax in the spring? Because we've extended our time and presumably the budget because of that, or is that totally not possible?
It's I wouldn't say it's not possible. It becomes more difficult because we lose a year of collections and we push our collections back a year. It may also force a higher rate. Again, because, or it's gonna last a shorter period of time because we're not gonna be able to build our cash balances up because we'll have lost a year. And we're gonna, as it is with the income tax, if it passes in November, we're still gonna spend more than we're taking in the 18-19 school year, even with an income tax passing. If we wait until 19 to put it on the ballot, so we don't start collecting 20, now you're saying, okay, now we're not only gonna spend more than we're taking in the 18-19 school year, we're gonna spend more than we're taking in by a lot more in the 19-20 school year, which is gonna make it harder to build up a cash balance that's gonna carry us out as far as the projections that you saw. So it would not be the best choice to wait until May for an income tax.
Okay.
You lose a lot of the long-term structural benefit because of the lost year of collection.
Okay. Any other question,
Yeah, the other one was I had, do you have a sense of, this is back to pay to participate in the gentleman's comment, Mr. Tyson's comment about could we lower the family max to $750? Do you have any sense of how much, because we have a goal we have to meet because of the cuts that we made, and I didn't know whether, because it's based on the number of families who actually have that many athletes, right? And so, any sense of, or you really need to go back and look
I would
at the
need to go
numbers?
back and,
Okay.
without going back and looking at the data, my sense is that it would not make a significant hole in the amount of money that we are anticipating raising. Again, you're talking now about having 2 kids each in 2 sports before you hit the cap. There will be a handful of those across the district. I don't think it will be enough to significantly impact. But again, I would have to go back and look at the data to be sure.
I just didn't know, because you had looked somewhat at that just to come up with the cap in the first place, and so it had come up in discussion before, so I just didn't know if that was something that.
No.
Yeah, okay.
It would be something I'd rule.
You need to
Again,
look at.
I don't, my gut is that it would not cause a serious problem with the amount of revenue that we're anticipating.
Might be a $5 to $8 million or $8,000 swing.
That's probably about right.
Yeah.
That's probably right. But it still leaves us within the range of what we were shooting for.
Okay.
Because some of the assumptions that we're using are what will the loss of participation be based on the fee.
Right.
So there's some flexibility there. But it's within the realm of reason.
And when we're on those fees, a couple other things that come up that I've been thinking about this a lot, right? And I really struggle with it, but I know it's what we need to do right now. And I really appreciate your analysis that you put into this to help us understand and look at lots of different levels of both academic or non-athletic and athletic fees. And I think, you could correct me if I'm wrong, our strategy has been craft the activity fee to cover the similar kind of amount of spending that we have in non-athletic, and craft the participation fee to cover the amount of costs in the athletic fee. So that's why that was kind of structured that way, right? And I think again, with all the different options that we've looked at and you've sent out to us and so forth, it seems like that's sort of the right option. And I think from a timing perspective, I've been thinking about this a lot. We've talked about this for years, whether this is something we should do or not, and certainly for the last few months. And I think it needs to happen now, right? Just from an implementation timing perspective, if it's going to happen this year at all. And I think we're really committed to making it happen this year. So that's my thoughts on those. Thank you, though. So, in terms of the options in the levy structure and so forth, my goal is to pass a levy, right? I mean, that's what we have to do in Ohio with school districts. And you look at you know, that last slide about the, you know, mandated increases in spending and the lack of any support of any magnitude from the state to cover that. Like, we just need to pass a levy. And I think we kind of forgot that as a district, because it's been a while and we, you know, haven't had these conversations and things like that. So that's like my primary goal. Secondly, though, I think income tax is the right way to go, right? I don't think a property tax is right for us, and we've done a lot of analysis on this for a long time. And I think that, you know, supporting a portion of our revenue with some type of income tax is the best strategy for it. It's a little complex to sell, but it's sustainable long term. There's lots of great reasons why I think that's the best strategy. And having talked to lots of people and gone door to door and done a lot of work in all the levy committee before, I think we're really close with an earned income tax. You know, I think that the community gave us feedback that 1 1/4 was too high, right? If we'd have come with 1, it would have been okay. I'm in support of an earned income tax of 1%. I think it's just sort of the easy thing to sell. It's the easy, you know, way to engage the community. You know, we get the feedback, 1 1/4 was too much. We made some changes. We go back with 1, and I think we're close enough. We can make that work. And so that's kind of my current position. But again, my first goal is to get a levy passed, and I think an income tax levy is better. I think an earned income is an easy, clean story. It's easier to get the senior support. You know, there's not many seniors that live on Social Security alone. There's often pensions and things like that that could be taxed under an all-income strategy. I think we got to get the senior support. You know, I've heard people say that maybe they voted against the previous levy because they thought it wasn't fair, because either seniors weren't taxed or maybe because they wanted to pay more or something like that. But I think people don't vote against the schools because they want to pay more. I think they just felt that level was too high. You know, they just felt that 1 1/4 was too much, and if we go back with 1, it's sort of a clean, easy story that doesn't engage another conversation at a different level. You know, and if we get stuck in what's earned income versus unearned income, I'd rather have property tax and so forth, I think it's just complex. And I think it's a clean story that we can go and sell to the community and make up those few extra percentage points. So that's kind of where I'm at that, and I want to float that out, but I really want to have a great discussion around it, because again, my goal is to support the schools, right? And that's where we need to get to. And whatever the highest probability is way that we can get there, I'm all for.
I agree with you that our goal is to pass, but I do think we can tell a simple story with a total income tax. I agree. The two things I heard were it was the wrong mechanism, meaning an earned income vet tax versus a total income tax, and the rate was too high. It was too big of an ask. And so if we go to a 0.75 total, that addresses that issue. We're going to a much smaller amount. And then I think the story with an income tax is just as easy to tell because it's one line. You go to one line on your income tax, right? Like
It's line 5 of the state.
Line 5 of the state
tax.
income tax, whereas you don't have to explain what is earned and what is not earned and what is taxed and not taxed. It's line 5 or whatever, sorry, you just said, of your state income tax. And I think that's just as easy, if not an easier message to sell. So that's sort of where some of the reasons where I said, I also, you know, some of the things that it's spread across everybody in the district, so nobody's really exempt from a total income tax. So, people who are living on nothing but unearned income wouldn't be paying the tax, and that was another thing that I had heard that people were objected to the earned income tax for. So.
Mike, are we able to address Rick's question about if we did, I'm just curious, if we did do the 6.5 property tax, what it would be per?
Give me, I believe it's a little over $200 per 100,000, but I can calculate it in about 5 seconds if you give me a chance.
I'm just
give me a
curious.
minute.
I think one of the things we kind of struggled with And in having these conversations is that people kind of think they sort of have a choice, right? Like whether, oh, I'll just wait for the next one because it'll be all income or earned income or property and so forth. And like the more options we have, if it's 7 or 3 or whatever, right? You know, you just got too many choices, and it's hard to get. If everybody can choose one of the 7, none of them are going to have more than 50%, right?
If you're not a senior citizen and getting the homestead exemption, it's $227.50 per $100,000. And then there would be a 0.85 mil reduction, which is going to lower that a little bit.
And you know, in the last levy campaign, lots and lots of people did calculations on things like 5% reduction in my taxes. The property taxes is this much, and the income tax is that much. Well, they definitely don't match, right?
But they were
And
never, never intended to match.
No, exactly, right?
Right.
But I think people could do this calculus, like, oh, 6.5 is better for me than the income, or vice versa, or whatever, right? And I think that's not really the conversation. I think as soon as we get to that conversation in a levy, you know, sense, we sort of lose it. I think we have a mechanism. We need to fund the schools. All of these options raise the same amount of money, you know, for the most part, right? You know, we're going to have to revote them in 5 years or maybe longer with the property tax, but you know, it's not really without the amount of money. It's just like we need to support our schools, period, right? With a tax. This is the way we do it.
For the net after the reduction would be $198 per 100,000 would be the net of the 6.5 less the 0.85.
For senior citizens.
For non-senior citizens.
Oh, okay.
For seniors who qualify for the homestead, $25,000 of their market value is excluded, so it's a little bit lower.
Thanks.
I do agree, though. I think an income tax that is a better mechanism for funding our schools, in part because it diversifies for a lot of the reasons we talked about already. It diversifies our revenue streams. It's long-term sustainable. It has a longer-term sustainability. It's better for business development because jacking up the property taxes hurts development because we're already one of the highest taxed districts or entities in Licking County, so people go elsewhere to start their businesses, which then means we can't try to equalize the Class 1 versus Class 2 property tax. Tax structure that we have in Granville, and also a property tax disproportionately affects lower income homeowners. They pay a higher proportion of their income to property tax than higher income people. So I think for all of those reasons, an income tax is a solid choice.
It's a little complicated, and we've gone through this conversation ourselves and with the community and so forth. And it's tough to kind of wrap your mind around all the reasons why it is, although we've had great analysis that shows us that, right? But either income tax option, I think we've got a lot going for us because we've had that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
There's been an active conversation, so I think that's going to help us out a lot in November.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So, good point.
Brother Amy?
Go ahead, Amy. I'm the newest. I want to hear what everyone has to say.
We went through extensive thought process before we put the last levy on the ballot, and we determined at that point that we felt that diversification was critical, that if possible, lessening the burden slightly on property owners who were not wealthy was the right thing to do. I have heard in the forums a lot of concerns that income tax, and especially earned income tax, is unfair because it would exempt senior citizens or retirees, rather. I sort of look at it in the other direction. because Mike did an analysis of homeownership since the first time that an income tax was voted in Granville, which was about 15 years ago.
Yeah, the last time.
The last time, not this most recent.
Right.
But it was all income tax, and about 50% of the housing has turned over since then. And what jumps out to me about 15 years is that's about the life cycle of a school child. And we hear a lot anecdotally about people coming in to consume the education here and then moving out when their children have graduated. And it seems to me as though it is not unfair if they are not intending to contribute to the community on a long-term basis. It is not unfair to ask them to contribute a little bit more on their short-term basis. And that's why I really feel as though the earned income tax is a more fair option. And to the argument that seniors then would not be contributing, 75% of our revenue, give or take, would still be coming from property tax. And retired homeowners would still be contributing mightily to that total. So that argument doesn't obtain for me at all. The other criticism that we heard regularly was that it was too much, that 1.25 was too much. So I think 1% is not an unreasonable amount. I wish to goodness the legislature could come up with a reason that we didn't have to keep doing this. But as Jeff pointed out, all of the things that we're working towards, big picture solutions, aren't going to help us. And to anyone who didn't believe that people have lost their jobs and that we didn't lose some really outstanding employees, they're either willfully ignorant or being disingenuous, and I don't respect either of those positions. We lost some really good employees that we couldn't afford to lose. And we need to not lose any more. So yes, we have to pass a levy. I believe strongly it needs to be in November. It's more cost effective for us. We start collecting it sooner and we can not lose more good employees. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question we need to have at least in my opinion, we have to try again in November. And I prefer either one of the income taxes. I think frankly, I'm leaning towards the 0.75 all income tax. I see the merits of both. I also of a mindset to I tend to agree that it's not going to be a hard sell if we go that route, but it gives an opportunity to see let's see if this one works, and so I'm leaning towards I'm definitely leaning towards the all income tax, even though I'm fastly approaching that senior citizen age group. And you know, to me, it's all tied in together, the pay to participant fees and the student activity fee increases. I hate doing those. And I think in the board discussions relative to what other communities have done, we've been sensitive to that and tried to make it as minimal an impact as we can. And I think we're lucky that we do have support organizations that are willing to step up and help out as much as possible, so we don't so we can try to minimize any adverse effect it has on our students. So, I mean, I don't know anyone that wants to increase their taxes. But as long as we have the district has the options we have to face, we have to. And I would just encourage the community and the board, and I think the board has done an outstanding job, and the administration, of advocating to both our legislative representatives and the village and the township our situation and how they can be beneficial to the schools. And I think we need to continue that and maybe even push harder on that. Because, at least in my opinion, at some point, talk is cheap. And I think one of the encouraging things that came out of the last levy campaign was hopefully a better understanding of the limitations that the district has about raising revenue and how our governmental brethren are key to that. So, we have to do what we can do with the rules that we're given. But there's other entities that can work in partnership with us to help in those situations. And we as a community, I think, owe it to them to let them know how we feel about that. So
how do you get that word out? I know I'm not supposed to interrupt, I'm sorry. Because I think that would resonate.
That was part of our message. That's always been part of our message.
The last 5 years.
Yeah, all of these things that, our limitations, things that we can try and push, economic development and other kinds, those have always been part of our message. And it's just amount of, how engaged people are. And sometimes they're engaged and sometimes they're not. Hopefully maybe, a May levy versus a November, May ballot versus a November ballot, people are more engaged in November than in May. Perhaps that will make a difference, and it's hard to say, but I think a lot of what Fred has just talked about has always been part of our message. It's just a matter of how engaged people want to be, and we will continue to push those same messages that we've been pushing. That Mr. Brown is at the State House all the time, advocating for public education, and just ways the state can be more efficient, but also, and Mr. Sobel's involved in creating a sustainable school funding formula so that when the next governor comes in, they won't completely tear everything apart. So, we're doing all of these things, and just, unfortunately, as Mr. Brown said, it doesn't help our short and long term,
Yeah.
But, I'm sorry, if what you're asking is how to make a difference at the legislative level?
No, I actually think, how do you get more people like me? I'm just a resident here, help advocate for you, and put it in language people understand.
I don't know.
I'll be honest,
right.
in the last election, people didn't understand. And I think it was one of those things that was kind of, we give, and they want more, and they want more, and they want more, and you know what, we're gonna say no, because we don't understand how the money's being spent, and we don't, that's what I heard. How do I be part of that solution?
Well, I think a number of ways, and I said at the last, I don't know if it was a levy forum or board meeting, you learn a lot when you lose. And I think everyone learned a lot in losing with the levy not passing on what we can do to better communicate the message that needs to get out there. Now, as far as the village, and let the village know what you think when there's talk of development, and talk to your legislators about how school funding's done. Go directly to them and talk to them about that and say, we we need your help. I mean, speaking for myself, we moved to Granville almost 20 years ago because of the schools. The charm of the village, obviously, but my wife and I moved here because of the schools. We didn't move here because of village council or township trustees or any of that. We moved here because of the quality of education. And my three children who have all graduated have benefited. And it's probably one of the best decisions we have made as a family ever was moving here. But we need to, as a community, need to share with other elected officials how important the schools are and how they can be helpful to the schools.
And I can make another suggestion, is that you could be on the levy committee. No, I mean, the bigger the
Right.
levy committee, the less work each person has to do,
Yeah.
right? And so even if you're on the levy committee and you talk to 20 people and you get those 20 people to talk to 20 people and you help craft the message because you certainly had a certain perspective on what you thought you were hearing, right? And so then you can help craft the message. And so Beth Howell right here, I don't know if you're signing people up or not, but. But again, I mean, but you can be, you can be heavily involved, you can be less heavily involved, but again, the more numbers that we have on that committee spreading the message, I think, helps.
Yeah, and we have a very educated community in general, right? But I don't think our community educates themselves on school finance very often, other than at levy campaign times, right? And we had a complex issue because we're looking for an income tax, which is different than a property tax. And so it was hard for people to get their mind around that. And I think we did our very best of being completely open with all the information, the data, and the analysis and so forth. But I think we sort of lost our way with the fundamentals of what we need to sell and why. It's like, you gotta choose really good schools. You gotta choose great schools. You gotta vote for a levy to have great schools. And if you don't vote for a levy, schools get worse, right? And I think people sort of forgot that connection, right? And the fact that, yes, you do have to regularly vote for levies in Ohio because that's the levy cycle, right? And yes, there are implications to failing levies, right, by losing people. And I think if we get back to that fundamental message, the community of Granville is all about our schools, right? That's why people move here and things like that. And I think once we get back to that message fundamentally, like whatever the mechanism is, property or income, this kind of income, that kind of income thing, you gotta choose great schools and you gotta do it at the ballot box, right? And if we get that kind of emotional connection, then I think we'll pass. We got the no out of our system, I hope. Right? And people need to have that engagement and get here. And I think the levy cycle is in some ways healthy because it does engage people in the conversation. It does make them know that wow, I did really make a difference. You vote at national elections, you're not quite sure if you make a difference or not, but a lot of people voted in Granville and they made a difference, right, in the quality of our schools, right? And we're gonna do our best with the resources that we have, but I honestly think that there's a simple approach. We put this on the ballot and we pass it and back we go. So thanks for your comments and thanks for staying engaged, everyone.
Just one point with the total income tax, Social Security is not taxed. Right, so.
In either scenario.
In either scenario. Oh,
Right.
so with the earned income tax, it wasn't either, so.
Correct.
Social
Well, yeah.
Security is not taxed in Ohio by any level of government. Other than the feds do tax some of it, but the state does not tax Social Security and nor do schools.
And unlike the earned income tax, the all income tax does have exemptions. So there is an exemption.
It's over $2,000 per dependent.
Per dependent. So that is a different nuance.
It's tiered by income by the state.
But it is it's line 5 on your state. I looked at it today.
Right.
So.
Because there was a lot of confusion from, at least some of the messaging, what kind of pass-through income counts or doesn't count, what does constitute earned income. And so I think, people, they got bogged down in that as well. Whereas if you just say total income, line 5, boom. Line 5, and then minus one, what are we subtracting 2.33?
2.33
mils of your income tax, and there's your total burden.
Yeah.
Of your property tax, what did I say? Income tax. Of your property tax, and there's your burden. So, and it's a different message, like you said, because, you know, in the past with a property tax, you can say it's 198 per 100,000, but the message isn't the same with an income tax. But I do think it's actually easier with a total income tax. It's two numbers. It's your boom line 5, and then you're going to get a reduction of your property tax of 2.33 mils. And we can advertise what that is per 100,000. What is that per 100,000? Math guy.
Make it a round number.
Well,
I go ahead.
I was going to say, the other thing about the income tax is there's no renewal of the PI levy.
Right.
And this board member, frankly, is very apprehensive to have to put two different measures on the ballot. Because it's so close together, it's a tough sell. You can look at just local district. It's very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to go to Thomas's point, this was something new to the community in the sense what we did in May, and we did lay a lot of groundwork about it. So I think coming back again, whether it's earned or all, but we've loosened them up to the idea of the income tax the second time around, which I think is a good thing. I much would have rather passed it in May, obviously, but we've at least engaged and we've started the discussion and engaged in it.
The reduction for a non-homestead exemption is $71 per 100,000.
I have some kind of level of concern of changing from an earned income to an all income, because I think it potentially could be more divisive in the community, right? Like, why is this change being made, and who's it in support of and who's it not? And I think it could be a little more confusing from a senior vote perspective as well, right? Because we have a very clean story with an earned income tax with seniors, whereas seniors that do have dividends or pension income or other things like that, because most seniors in Granville don't live purely on Social Security, right, could be not as clearly supportive. And I think we did not a very good job of getting the senior vote last time around, and that was a problematic. This income tax strategy is designed to be, supportive by the community, and the seniors are important votes. So I think we need to do something very different, right, with how we promote to seniors and so forth through the levy committee and things like that. But I'm just a little concerned that changing the mechanism will have more questions, right, and cause more confusion, and maybe bring out another group of opposition in some way, right, that hasn't been as clearly formulated before. And whether they target seniors with misinformation, or whether they, find some other mechanism to, make up data or whatever, I'm not quite sure. Or have valid concerns about, a much smaller percentage of the community paying a higher percentage of taxes. I'm not quite sure. So, I think it was divisive enough this last levy campaign. And the simpler we can make it, right, in my opinion, instead of 1.25, you said, no, we're going to do 1, and it's clean and easy. The easier from that perspective to pass it. I have real concerns passing a different mechanism. Although the number is less, and I'm motivated by the fact that 0.75 sounds better than 1, right? But
there were two messages. One was it was a wrong mechanism because you're not taxing everybody, and 2, it was too big. And so by going to an all income, you get to the 0.75, and you get to the everybody pays.
Yeah, I think people thought it was a wrong mechanism because it was a different mechanism, because it was some kind of income.
No,
they
had valid reasons for saying that it wasn't. They said it disproportionately hurts wage income earners because you're not taxing unearned income. There's a chunk of income that wouldn't have been taxed, that we, of unearned income that can potentially go to our total revenue stream, and so there were valid reasons for people, not just because it was an income versus a property, but because it was specifically an earned income. So, so I think there were 2 objections to what we went for last time. And again, I still think 0.75, line 5 minus $71 per 100,000 is a pretty straightforward message. And there is a good chunk of our seniors who make $100,000 to $200,000. And how much of that income do you need? Listen, I was all for the mechanism that we went for before, you know, again, but people didn't necessarily like that we were trying to protect a certain segment of the population. I mean, that was another message that I heard. Why would you target just that segment of the population and not try to, you know, spread the burden across everybody? That's the people who are talking to me. That's the message I got.
One of the things is, as being the newest board member and coming in after the decision had been made and from my perspective, looking at it, I thought it was an interesting and a good strategy and sound in trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood the amount. I understand why people said it might have been too high. And it didn't pass. So I look at the 0.75 earned, or all, let's give this a try. And the thing that concerns me the most, frankly, is the 36% voter turnout. Because that's not a robust number for any segment of our community. And that's something that I think that's the thing I took away from the results was we collectively have to do a better job of getting out the vote. Because 36, if the schools indeed are the most important thing, 36% is, to me, it's woefully inadequate. That's an understatement. So I think that's, to me, I view that's the biggest challenge is we've got to get these people out to vote for the schools. If this is indeed the most important thing to you, and I think for most people it is, and maybe I'm totally wrong about that we have to get those folks out, to turn them out to vote. Yes.
So, before you speak, maybe I can help a little. From a summarization standpoint, I'm not necessarily hearing anybody advocating for a property tax. So I just wanted to make that abundantly clear to the entire board. So you're really talking about the difference between 1 unearned and 0.75 on all. I said at every forum there is no perfect solution. Okay, so you are in the process. You're making the sausage right now. In truly trying to, both options do help the schools with that long-term sustainable funding goal. So both options are viable. Both options have pluses and minuses. I think they have, what we need to highlight is the positives of both options. And the first one is, from what Mike shared, they do create that long-term sustainability of the funding of schools, where, you know, the other mechanism that we had discussed that you necessarily aren't oriented towards is more of a short-term, it's what we do right now. And there were reasons why you moved in a different direction to create a more sustainable funding mechanism moving forward for the school district. So just wanted to state that, and I know, Rush, you have not had a chance to opine, but I thought that might hopefully narrow and
He might have been gonna go for that.
focus.
Well, not anymore.
Not anymore. It's 4-1. Yeah.
And I very rarely have opinions on anything.
Yes, yes.
Anybody else? That's a good summary, thank you. And you are correct in your presumption. I'm in favor of an income tax. You know, there's been a lot of great points from folks in our audience tonight. Thank you. It seems to me that no matter what we do, we all recognize what the issue is here, which is Thomas, I think, very astutely framed it. Are we voting for great schools or not? It's a pretty simple equation, because despite the fact that there was an allusion to there being a better way, there is no better way for Granville to maintain great schools than to step up and support them by funding them. That's the structure that we're faced with in the state of Ohio. This board and this administration and many folks in this community have been advocating for a number of years. As Jen said, Mr. Sobel and Mr. Brown are probably have their own reserved parking spaces down at the State House. For as often as they're down there, in addition to what they do here in the district, but for as often as they're down there trying to educate, inform, influence, advocate for the legislature, for the state government to step up to its responsibilities to fund schools in a meaningful way. Think about it. In 10 years, we've had a 0.3% annual increase in funding from the state. That's absurd. That's absurd. That should be offensive to everyone in this community and every community that values education. And it's the type of thing that ought to send us all to the ballot box on a regular basis. Not just to step up and fund schools, but to make sure that our elected representatives share those same values and vote behind those values. We're letting folks off the hook. We have for years let folks off the hook. We have to stop doing that. One of the challenges that is well known in Granville is that we don't have as big a commercial base as a lot of other districts, and so it puts a bigger burden on residences. And you made the comment that folks are constantly asked to give, and that is the case. That is the absolute truism about living in Granville. But as Mr. Wolf said, and I firmly believe it, that's why we live here, for the schools. This is a beautiful community. It's a wonderful community. It has great attributes. There are a number of wonderful communities across the state of Ohio. There aren't many that have the attributes, the natural beauty, the small town village feel, and superior schools. And so that's why folks live here. That's why we moved here 16 years ago. I've had the good fortune, my wife and I have 3 of our 4 kids have graduated from Granville schools, and they've gone on to higher education, and they have everyone said to me they could not have felt better prepared by their education in Granville schools, and they felt significantly better prepared than many of their peers entering college. And folks will say to me and say to others, well, that's part of the community. And that is, people have the expectation here that our kids are going to achieve. Families support it, kids go to school for the most part prepared, but it's all about the education system. Because if it was just about the strength of my family and my values for education, I could live in any community in this state and expect the same results for my kids, but I don't. I live here because I know what the results are here. And that's really what we're talking about, is, as Thomas said, a commitment to great schools. And so it's our obligation, it's our duty to make sure as a board that we continue to push for that. And we have, for a number of years, pinched pennies, stretched dollars in every way that we can to put money into the classroom, because that's where the greatest impact is. We value extracurricular activities, we value the arts, we value sports, we value clubs, and we support them. 29 varsity sports. We have, I think the best music, theater, arts program around. But when we focus on where we're spending money, we're spending it in the classroom. And that's what we did when we frankly had to make those cuts that we made after the levy lost last time. There is no better way. Anybody who tells you that is not telling you the truth. The theory that some folks have advanced is that we should make massive cuts. And we we've heard that from people both before and after the election, that our costs are too high. You saw evidence tonight that our costs are not too high. And our message needs to be simple going forward. It costs a lot of money to have great schools, and we spend what it costs to have great schools, but the results are there. We've tried to balance the pay-to-participate fees, the activity fees. We've imposed them in a way that allows us to not have to cut more personnel from the academic side, but also hopefully doesn't discourage people from participating, because we all know kids out there who join an activity, a club, a sport, an extracurricular group, and it makes a difference to them. And oftentimes that difference isn't evidenced for a number of years, and we want every child in this community to participate in every way that they can. And there's no perfect way to find the right dollar amount, so we're trying to be sensitive to that, and yet at the same time minimize cuts in the classroom. As Mr. Wolf indicated, it's all about advocacy for all of us. No matter what we decide to put on the ballot, and no matter how this community votes, it really is about what we want to be as a community. When we put that 1.25 earned income tax on the ballot last time, it was aspirational. And we sat back and said, after studying it for well over a year, discussing it openly for well over a year, that we thought that was the right amount to put the district on solid financial footing for the foreseeable future, and would allow us to have the appropriate amount of money in the bank to deal with the fact that our buildings are older, our facilities are older, costs go up, costs never go down. The community didn't support that. And actually, when I say the community didn't support that, the 36% who voted didn't support that. I'm a firm believer that, and I hope I'm not wrong, there's a larger part of this community that will turn out in the next election and evidence their support for our schools. So we really are faced with either 1% earned income tax, which is down a quarter point from where we were last time, same structure, or switching to the 0.75. And I share the concern that Amy and Thomas have spoken about changing and going to a different mechanism now, and whether that would be confusing to people, and it might. I hope it's not, if we go to 0.75, but it might. One of the things that we resolved to do as a board after the levy phase, we met the very next morning, bless you, we met the very next morning, and we talked about getting people out to talk to us, to talk to each other, to share views, to share ideas, to share thoughts, to put the better way out there, to really think about what we're doing. Now, I will tell you that we are as transparent as can be. Every one of our financial reports is up on our website. We get audited every year by the state. We get a clean audit. We show what we spend. And one of the things that I said to people consistently in the last levy campaign, and I'll continue to say, if you think about all the taxes that we pay, federal taxes, state taxes, and local taxes, I have no idea where most of my federal taxes get spent. I have some idea where some of my state taxes get spent, but when I pay a school tax, I know exactly where it goes. It goes into the facilities to provide the people and the supplies and the materials for my kids and for other kids like them. And they benefit from that every single day. So when we think about the taxes we pay, the most important tax we pay is the local school tax, because it impacts our lives directly every single day. And I think that's the message we have to continue to put out there for people. As between the earned income tax and the all income tax, I was an early proponent of the earned income tax. I liked the structure. I certainly was a proponent of the 1.25 because I thought it was economically the right thing to do. And I like the earned income tax because it addressed an issue that came up in the last levy election 5 years ago, which is a number of seniors said, we can't do much more. We just don't have that ability to do much more. And so I thought the earned income tax addressed that. Maybe part of it was messaging, maybe part of it was comprehensive, maybe part of it was just, it was something very new and different, but that didn't carry the day. And then when we started having meetings afterwards, we had a lot of folks come in and speak to us, and everybody had different views, and I value all of them. But one of the sort of themes that I saw over and over again, or I heard over and over again from people at those meetings, and frankly from people that I talked to outside those meetings, is there was a resentment that we did the earned income tax, that we were picking winners and losers economically in the community. There was very good reason for that. I think the logic is sound. We didn't win. And so when I look at it now, either of the options, if approved by this community, if supported by the community, has practically the same economic result going out for us, going out for 10 years. We can be off the ballot for, well, we can renew it in 5, but it's enough to get us 8 or 9 years out. But I'm wondering if maybe we're not supposed to pick winners and losers economically. I'm wondering if that's one of the messages that came out of the last campaign, which is that everybody here has a common interest in our community and in one of the great attributes of great treasures of our community, which is our schools. And everybody here accepts some responsibility for funding that. And Amy's point is a strong one, that 75% of our budget comes from property taxes, which everybody pays. So seniors and others on fixed income would still pay that. But I'm leaning, as Fred indicated, I'm leaning towards the all-income tax, the 0.75, persuaded by a couple of points. One, the question about whether we ought to be picking winners and losers. Two, the point that was made at our last, the fourth of 4 levy forms we had, which is that that lower amount, that 0.75, is meaningful. Maybe it's optics, maybe it's more than optics, but it's meaningful to people to be under the 1%. And that it's straightforward. As Jen indicated, we all have that same line 5 on our tax returns. We can all go directly to that number and figure out what it is. I'm concerned that, to Thomas's point, that may motivate perhaps another group unknown to us to come out in opposition to the levy, whether it's focused on fixed income, whether it's seniors, whether people whose predominant income source is other than their earned income, could be business owners or others, concerned about that. I don't know how to weigh that. I don't know how much, how impactful that could be. But then that shifts the burden back to us, back to all of us, back to every one of us, to be persuasive in the argument that we all pay because we value great schools. We all step up and we get out and vote and get our neighbors out to vote because we value great schools. So I don't know that there's I don't think there's a wrong choice in either one of those. I don't know that there's a choice that is better or not. After listening to the discussion tonight, after listening to the committee in 4 public forums, I'm inclined to try the 0.75 all income to give the community another option, something we haven't given them before, and see whether folks like it. And I hope it's not that easy, that it's just whether folks like it. Because as we said after the last election, elections do have consequences. And the consequences of failure, if we fail again, become magnified. And I absolutely agree with each of my colleagues here. It's imperative that we're on the ballot in November. there's, first of all, we're all paying attention. People are interested. Secondly, more importantly, you know, it's no way to run a business by waiting until we're in financial distress, in deep financial distress, to come back and try and figure out how to solve it. We need to do it now. We need to be out in front of it. So I think absolutely we need to be on the ballot now. We'll continue advocating for economic development. We'll continue advocating at the State House for the state to step up and be responsible. We'd like to think that there will be some modest, appropriate, thoughtful economic development in this community going forward. Will require leadership from all of our elected officials, state and local. Doesn't require massive amounts of commercial development coming to Granville. It requires targeted, thoughtful, appropriate development. A couple of new buildings here and there which would move the needle pretty significantly. And it should happen. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens only intentionally. And we need the community to convey the expectation that it should happen intentionally. As I said, I don't often have opinions.
No, never.
So I will, I think the arguments are powerful arguments in favor of the 1% earned income tax and the 0.75 all income tax. I lean, and it's close. It's close, and I could get, I can advocate equally for either option, but I lean to the 0.75. So, I don't have to be the last one who speaks if anybody else has anything else they want to say.
We can have a chance to chat about it later because it's on the agenda.
Okay. All right, well then, having sucked all the oxygen out of the room, I'll close that part of our discussion. And we'll move to board reports, and then we will come up with a vote a little bit farther down the agenda. Thomas, you're on for the GEF.
Right, I'm sad that I was not able to attend myself the Blue, White, and Boom event, but I am thankful that the GEF hosted another fantastic event. And Jeff, if you have any updates for us specifically,
So
I'd love to hear.
what I'd like to report is the joy I had in walking from the Robbins Hunter Museum, listening to our electric orchestra that was funded by GEF, and then walking to the Midway or the center stage and listening to our blue steel drum band and our jazz band perform, and then later hearing our singers. To me, a lot of the entertainment that was brought to that area was because of our student performers. And so the GEF event, it's always nice to see people come back and see their friends. It was fun to see the age range. I got to meet a new person that I had never met, Mr. Koenig, who was a math teacher here in Granville, which was nice. Got to meet him. So I really appreciate the GEF taking on the role of engaging our alumni base and trying to connect them back to Granville schools beyond just the float in the parade, but really talking about the legacy of being a Blue Ace. And I heard a lot of stories about that. And so I really enjoyed it, and I would encourage, if you are an alumni, to come to the next event next year. So, great.
Thank you. Action agenda.
Action agenda. Okay, 10.01 is the laundry list of OSBA policies that I referenced in my earlier report.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Who seconded?
Fred.
Fred, okay. As I referenced, most of these are related to changes in reference notes.
No one's going to ask for another reading, I think.
No.
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 Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Thank you. 10.02 is a resolution of, to rename the GHS and GMS activity fee and set rates. I am open to any motions that may occur after I make my recommendation.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Anybody have a thought on a different name?
I kind of like not changing the name and just calling it an activity fee.
I agree.
I think people will figure out that the participation fee is for athletics and the other one is
For
for
everything
the rest
else.
and so forth, and I don't want people to think they can opt out because they're not in some club or something like that.
Well, because it's, you know, what you consider an extracurricular also, right? Like, I mean, because this goes towards, class advisors, which helps the entire class, right? It goes towards dances, it goes towards, I don't know, remember the other.
Student council,
Student government,
yeah.
which affects everybody, right? Whereas if you sort of, you know, I think adding that word in there just makes it feel like, oh, I don't do one of those, so why am I paying it? So, because it does go towards, you know, things that affect all students. So, I think I tend to agree with Mr. Miller. But
We could remove the renaming and just set the fee.
It requires a
motion to amend.
Motion to amend.
I would like to make a motion to amend this item to keep the fees as stated, but remove the renaming of the activity fee.
Second.
Okay.
Any discussion? No? Okay. Let's take the roll.
This is the roll on amending the resolution.
Correct.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye. Now do we need to
Vote on the amended, yes.
So what is left then, we'll raise the high school fee from $50 to $75, and the middle school fee will remain at $30, will not change.
Any discussion on
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
that? Aye.
Thank you. Approval of the resolution to implement pay to participate athletic fees.
So moved. Oh, sorry.
Dr. Corman,
Second?
No, let somebody else.
Wait a second.
Second.
Is there a desire to change that family cap as was suggested, discussed earlier?
I think it's worth taking a look at to see how much of a swing.
Talk, yes, talk for a minute.
Right, I mean, if.
Again, sausage making.
If we have the cushion and it doesn't really move the needle in terms of what we need to raise. Although 750 is sort of a weird, I think 800 would be, since the fee is.
Depends if it's a middle school or high school or
right.
a combination of the two and so forth. Fred, thank you for at least seconding, because we gotta have this conversation and so forth. But
Yeah.
I think
I don't like it
what
at
is,
all.
the board was intending and was also amended earlier was that per student fee.
Mhm.
You know, Dr. Cron brought that up,
Yeah.
and the sensitivity to the family max. So again, I think the concept is recognition that we're trying to do the most to benefit the budget, but have the least impact on the families and students, and also on participation. We want students to participate. What I was going to say earlier related to the student activity fee is 85 to 90% of our students are engaged in some type of activity, which we want. That's a protective factor. That's something that we talk about from a wellness standpoint. So We do not want that to be impacted by a fee structure. However, in circumstances where it's potentially saving jobs, I absolutely am very supportive of making this recommendation to you as a board. And I could keep talking, but.
Well, the other thing I wanted to just mention real quick, somebody had talked about the middle school fee. And we had come up with that number because that's in line with what the GRD pays, GRD sports are.
Yes.
If not even a little bit less than what, right, like, or it's in the ballpark for, depending on the sport, so that's in line with what GRD middle scores. So that's,
Right.
I just
And-
wanted to sort of throw that out there, that's.
And what was brought up earlier, depending on the sport, they might not have as many contests as the varsity, but then again, other sports have as many or maybe just one less.
Right.
So I mean, I would suggest we just
I'm okay
leave
with
it
that,
as.
yeah.
At
as it is.
1,000. And I think it's gonna be too hard for Mike to do on the fly.
Yeah, again, I don't think that it's going to blow a hole in the budget to set a maximum at $750 rather than setting it at $1,000 per family.
As it is, the 1,000 maximum didn't really have a huge impact, did it, from?
The 1,000 did not, the 1,000 did not have a huge impact. Because of the cap on each student, the 1,000 does not have a lot of impact. The 750 will have, if you think about it, if you have 2 high school kids in 2 sports, there would be a $50 difference. If you have a high school and a middle school kid each in 2 sports, you're not hitting the maximum. It would take a 3rd child in a sport before you hit a max. There are probably a limited number of families with 3 kids in 7th through 12th grade in multiple sports, which is why I believe it will not put a hole in the budget to cap the maximum at $750.
What's the consensus? Or is there a consensus?
I think if it's not gonna make a big impact, then we should make it $750 if it's less onerous on people. I'm for that.
Because that could then raise it might not cut off somebody's participation.
Right.
Because they couldn't pay that for their one kid to
Right.
play that one extra
Right.
sport. So then, then they're, so it does have an impact, potentially an impact on participation. A positive impact, yeah.
So we need an amendment.
A motion to amend the resolution, is it a resolution? No, the.
Motion.
Motion, it is a resolution. From a family maximum of $1,000 to $750.
Second.
Let's call a roll on that, please.
Dr. Corman.
Aye.
Ms. Deeds.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. James.
Aye. Any further discussion on the pay to participate generally? Take the roll.
Dr. Corman.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Ms. Deeds.
Aye.
Mr. Janice.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. 10.04 student handbooks for the 18-19 school year.
So moved. Second, Jen.
Oh, Jen, okay.
Wait a minute.
Amy.
Oh,
Amy.
Amy, I'm sorry. I didn't hear myself. I thought you
So,
at the same time.
Thomas seconded.
I'll
Okay.
second Amy's
All right.
motion.
And remember, this is just the middle school and high school because we
Right.
already approved the elementary and intermediate.
Right. Has the change that you spoke about earlier.
Correct.
Okay. Any discussion? Comments? No? I like the changes that were made. Thank you for doing that.
Yep. We listen.
We know. Take the roll.
Ms. Deeds.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Dr. Corman.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. James.
Aye.
10.05 are the athletic and coaching handbooks for the 18-19 school year.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion, questions?
Any significant changes?
Now, basically minimal change in the athletic, but no change in coaching.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Jennings?
School fees for the 18-19 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. The only thing that I would say was an addition from the previous fee structure is that at the last meeting, Mr. Janice asked if we could consider a fee for the Global Scholars Diploma process as well, so we have included that in our fee structure. It's I believe a $50 fee for the travel and meals and associated costs for the Columbus Council on World Affairs.
So that's been added.
That's been added.
These all be collected with our new mechanism? How's the adoption of that going? I noticed some messages go out. People signed up for it, and do we think that's going to work?
Final forms?
Final
Well,
forms?
Final Forms is only going to be for the athletic pay to participate.
Oh, it's not going to include?
No, it is not going to include.
Pay for it will still
problem-
be-
Oh,
the
it's
problem
just
we have with-
information.
Now, the problem we
Okay.
have with is that they do not have a lunch point of sale program within Final Forms. So it makes sense to do the athletic through Final Forms, since they have to come on to register the students through Final Forms for the athletic anyway, so it makes sense to collect the fees that way.
Okay.
If we did the activity fee, or not the activity fees, well, the activity fees and the class fees through Final Forms, we'd still have to pay for it to do
The school lunch.
the school lunch, so it didn't, and the cost differential is, well, plus we're moving the cost onto the parents. The
Right.
cost differential is minimal, and so it seemed like it made more sense to keep the rest of the fees as people are used to doing it already, rather than changing the structure, that pay structure.
Other questions?
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Jennings?
10.07 is asphalt paving and repairs for $131,000.
So moved.
Second.
So they're not gonna pave the softball and baseball fields, are they?
Well, we actually are not going to pave the fields, but we are going to pave some areas that lead up to those
I
fields.
thought that might be the case.
Yes. I mean, our kids are tough,
Yeah.
but maybe not that tough.
Pave the outfields just to increase offense, right?
That's right.
Take the roll.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr.
Yes.
Wolf?
Yes.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Jennings?
Aye.
10.08 is the approval of the school-age childcare contract with Love and Learning Child Care Center.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Amy Klein is the director, and she has been waiting patiently, I'm sure. But getting educated on all of the things that happen in the Board of Education. So this rate has not changed from last year, so it is identical. And we conducted a survey of the parents that participated in the program and got a lot of positive results. And you know that program was run by Ruth Ann for many, many, many years, and we appreciate Amy stepping up in a very short time period and getting everything in order for that transition. So we're happy to recommend that contract again.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Now that it's on the-
Yes, 1 year.
Questions, comments?
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Jennings?
Aye.
Consent agenda 11.01A through
D.
D.
So moved.
Second.
If I could make one comment, on the donations, we had a little bit of communications mix-up, and the second and the third donations listed are actually the same donation. And that was just it was a communications breakdown, and so I don't think we need to formally amend the agenda, but it is, those are actually both the same donation.
Another thing that I would call your attention to, with the elimination of the 2 librarian positions, we are offering our GHS librarian and GES librarian 5 additional days this summer to get those libraries together, because that is an expansion of their duties. And we appreciate them stepping up and helping to support the additional workload.
Yes.
Wonderful as well that the Granville Arts Boosters stepped up with a $4,000 donation in support of the orchestra position, and as music boosters, we'll have to change our language there as we start to refer to them as the Arts Boosters now. But it's fantastic that the community appreciates all that we have in our music program and is willing to step up for the orchestra position.
Questions? Comments?
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Cornman?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Dees? Mr. Jennings?
Aye.
That moves us into finances.
Okay, first is the financial report for the month of June.
So moved.
A couple of things to point out. On page 4, I have updated the forecast to reflect our final expenditures and revenues for the year. Expenditures did come in a little bit higher than I was anticipating, primarily in purchase services being the main driver of that. Ended up a little bit high. I have also, there are a couple things that we have learned about since the May forecast. One of which is I have put in an amount starting in 2020 for the development of the medical facility at the Ackley property, based on the meeting I was at the week before last. That seems to be pretty much a done deal. The village, it seems, is on board. Their goal is to begin construction in the fall and complete construction by next fall, to take occupancy before the end of 2019, which would bring it on at the 2020 for payable in 21. The estimate is it will have a value of between $6.5 and $7.5 million. That's full value. I put it into the forecast based on the lower $6.5 million value. So what you don't see is that actually impacts the 2 years of the forecast beyond what is on the table here. The net result of all of this is essentially we are almost in the exact same place now as we were when the forecast was filed in May. The expenditures have pushed things up. That additional revenue from the development has brought some offsetting revenue. So that is one of the things I wanted to point out. On page 6, if you look at our total expenditures, we're up 4.2% over last year. You'll see a table in the grayer box at the bottom. I made 2 adjustments to that. One of the things I did was the 2 lines that are up above, the debt payments, which is the payments on the House Bill 264 project, which are now done, plus the lease purchase. I kind of backed those out because those are not really, short-term spending. It's a long-term project. And the other uses is primarily spending on things that should have happened the year before. They are making up for payments that should have been the year before. I backed both of those out, but then made two adjustments to that. The $258,000 in other uses that we spent during the 17-18 school year, both of those are because we were undercharged for certain things during the 16-17 school year. So in reality, that spending should have happened a year earlier. It didn't, so that inflates the growth rate. We also, in the benefits, because we funded the HSAs all up front, we incurred 12 months of benefit costs all in 1 month. And so what I did was took 6 months of the HSA costs and pushed that back a year. And when you do that, we end up with a 3.4% year-over-year growth rate in aggregate. And I think that is really a much more accurate picture of what our spending did between the 16-17 and 17-18 school years.
Does that have an impact on annual per student costs that we often use and talk about in the same way that other adjustments into or out of a year may do?
The transfers should not. The payments that are other uses, I believe that those are excluded because essentially in some ways there's a double spending in there.
Right.
And I believe that is excluded. The benefits will, the HSA will, because that's going to be all in 1 year.
Right.
So that is going, but offsetting that is, the $695,000 we spent out of the, last year, that wouldn't have been counted, but what it got, it would have when it actually, because a lot of that was transfers to our PI to pay for one-to-one and for the infrastructure project, and that was counted.
Right.
And so that will come out, because obviously we did not spend that again in the 17-18 school year, so that will offset the HSAs.
Because it's like numbers of transfers of this magnitude seem like they can have an impact on the per student cost, which is something that people
The transfers are
focus
generally
on.
excluded because, especially the transfers, you're transferring from one place to spend in another place. To count it in both would be double counting the same spending.
Okay.
And then the last thing on the last page, there is a summary of the food service operations. You will see that our revenue for the year was about $741,000, was $866 above what we paid AVI. So from that operating, which is what we tried to keep in balance, that did barely cover it. Obviously did not cover a lot of the other expenditures. And you will see an action item later on for us to do a transfer from the operating budget to the food service to essentially pay for the last payment. And it's really because of the pay-for fees, because of the level of fees. Those, of course, next year will go away because that is being transferred back to the parents. The nickel increase that we approved in the lunch fees at the last meeting should help then cover a lot of the other costs besides the ABI costs. So I'm hopeful next year that the revenues actually will cover the entire program, not just, or at least come very close, not just the direct payments to ABI. Dr. Corman.
Aye.
Ms. Dees.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Virginia. Okay. The next three items are the three different options that we have left for placing something on the November ballot. It says I recommend all three of them, which is kind of unusual. I will make some, if you don't mind, well, no, we can't even make them. I'm going to make a few comments. I know you had a discussion. I did not participate in the discussion. I do have just a couple of thoughts to share. This is not an easy choice. I don't know that there's a right choice, and I don't know that there's a wrong choice. I agree that one of the two income taxes is better for the long-term sustainability of the school district, and I think because of where we are, that we really do need to try one of the two options again. I think there's no doubt that if we are unsuccessful, that we have to do a property tax in May. I think we should do one of the income taxes. I know that we had a long discussion before placing something on the May ballot over a 1 versus a 1 1/4 on the earned income. I am not convinced that had we done a 1% in May that we would have passed. We might have been 1% or 2 closer. I don't know that we would have passed. That doesn't mean we wouldn't pass it in November. I think the dynamics have changed in what we're looking at for November than what we saw in May. The two dynamics being, one, I hope the turnout will be higher in November because it is a general election. And I also think that there was a level of shock that not only of the issue failing, but also I think there was a significant segment of the community who really didn't think we'd do anything if we failed. And I think that there was a level of shock because of the reductions that we made. I don't think that people necessarily believed we'd actually do it. And so I think that may change the dynamic. That said, the arguments that there's arguments for and against both choices. Very good arguments for and against both choices. I'm with Russ and Fred and Jen in that I do come down slightly on the side of doing the all-income tax, and there are 3 reasons for that. One is that Social Security is still exempt, so to the extent of our lower income seniors, a significant portion of their income is Social Security, and that will still be exempt from tax. A second is that, as there is on the state income tax return with the with the all income, there is a $50 senior citizen credit. What that means with a 0.75% rate is it's essentially exempting just about $6,700 of income, because that would, on $6,667 of income, the tax is $50. So the credit will offset that. I think there's a strong argument, and probably the most pervasive argument, that 3/4 is better than 1. I know it's on all income. That may mobilize some folks who sat out or may have been supported, but I think it will also bring some folks who voted against it strictly because of the ask, who don't have a lot of income that's not earned, so there's not a big difference in their base. And the 3/4 is significant. The other 2 items is there is a personal exemption. That personal exemption is graduated. Again, thinking about seniors at under $40,000 of income, it's $2,300 per exempt. If you have a senior couple, that's $4,600 of income that is also not taxed. And the other thing which I really hadn't thought about until I was thinking about this some today is that before you get to line 5 on the state income tax return, there is a deduction for medical expenses in excess of 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. So again, as seniors are more likely to have higher medical costs, and with lower, especially lower income, so 7.5% of their income is a much lower number, there will be a significant portion of medical costs that some seniors, not all, will be able to reduce their taxable income under the all income tax. And I think that the combination of all those things, but especially the 0.75% versus the 1%, is probably, to me, is enough to swing the argument in favor. If we went the other route, I don't think that would be a bad choice, a 1% on earned. I think either can pass. Unfortunately, I think neither could pass. I don't know, and I don't know where that tipping point is. But that's kind of my feeling on, again, for what it's worth, that is my feeling on the subject. I know you guys spent a lot of time, thinking about it, as we all have, and debating it. That's just my 2 cents worth. If you have any questions.
One, you told us at our most recent, I think at the last forum, that you had data that all income had dropped for the most recent tax.
All income has dropped, yes, all income did drop from 2015 to 16, which changed in the interim between when we were doing these. What you saw, the simulation that you saw tonight, for both the 1% earned income tax, which actually increased from before, and the 3/4 on all that decreased were already built into those. Those were both factored in to the estimates that were in my presentation.
How big a drop was it for all income? Do you know?
I should know that off the top of my head, and I do not. It was, I want to say it was about a 4% drop. I would have to, I gotta look up the numbers to be sure, but I think it was somewhere in that range.
Do you have any sense whether that could be an ongoing factor?
Unfortunately, the federal data, which breaks it out a lot more, at least as of late last week when I last looked, has not been released.
Mm-hmm.
And so without seeing that data to see where the drop occurred, where the drop occurred, I would presume that we would assume that it will not come back, that it was not a one-time thing, and maybe in 15 there was some one-time thing that drove it maybe higher than it should have, and so 16 came back down to a more normal level. But without seeing the specific sources of data, it's really hard to answer that question.
Of course.
But probably the all income will fluctuate more in general.
It will.
Right.
The all
An earned income will
income-
be a more steady increase of wages over time, whereas all income will be higher sometimes and lower sometimes.
Yeah, all income is definitely a little bit less stable. It does have the capacity to grow faster than earned income does, but also has the capacity to fall further than earned income does because of especially not really the pension side of it, but the side of it related to capital gains and business income, to a lesser degree, interest and dividends as profits and interest rates move, can be more volatile. Plus, taxpayers do have a little more flexibility in when they realize income of that kind. A lot of times they will react, in reaction to changes in federal tax law. They will accelerate or postpone the realization of capital gains, because that's the nature of that type of income. If I understand and interpret the discussion as it was, maybe that makes the most sense first is to start. It sounds like there's no interest in doing a property tax on the November ballot. Is to start by removing item 12.04 from the agenda. That might make the most sense, at least initially at this point.
Can we just go in order?
What do you need for that? Do you need to?
It would just take a motion to amend the agenda to remove that item from the agenda.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to remove item 12 from the agenda.
Second.
Discussion?
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Denise?
Aye.
Now I will turn it back over to Mr. Denise. to
So that leaves us
proceed.
in order. 12.02 is the, should put my glasses on. 1% earned income. And the 12.03 is the 0.75 all income. Unless anyone has any suggestions or alternatives, I think we just take them in order and go on that basis. Amy, you have a thought?
I'm okay with making a motion to remove 12.02.
Remove 12.02, which is the 1% earned income tax. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I'll kind of plead my case again. I think that's the one that passes easier, and I'm concerned that when we change the mechanism to a 0.75% all income, it's a harder, confusing story that kind of gets us into the conversation with seniors about, yeah, but you know, there's a $50 senior credit and there's a personal exemption and so forth, and I think there's a clean, easy story with 1.25 didn't pass and 1% did.
I disagree with you.
It's still, either one still takes a lot of education of the senior population. So I'm going to slightly disagree that I still think that it can be a fairly easy message.
And I think the 0.75
I do
optic
too.
is very strong.
I do too.
I think it's a strong message.
I do too.
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning to. You know, I don't, look, we know from experience, none of this is easy.
Okay.
And it's education about it, informing about it is one thing, engaging about it is the bigger challenge. And that's really going to be where we've got to do the work. We have a thoughtful, well-educated, interested community, and so we've got to find a way to engage them. And I think whatever we do, you know, I think we can explain the logic behind it.
Before we vote on my motion, though, do you have a sense of the income taxes that other districts have passed in the last 15 years, since we first tried? What percentage of them that have been successful are earned and what are all, give or take? Just off the top of
The
your head.
dynamics are, since 2000, keep in mind the first portion of that period,
There was
earned was
only
still
one
not,
choice.
earned was still not a choice for the
Right.
first portion of
Right.
that. Over the last 9 or 10 years, all the ones that have passed have been unearned.
All
Prior
the ones
to,
that have passed?
Yes.
All the ones?
Yes.
but almost all of them that
Oh.
have been tried have also been earned. I don't think there have been a lot of all income taxes tried over the last 10 years because of the earned option, being available. I think, you know, in the interim, that interim period before the earned was a choice, which was only a couple of years, obviously anything that passed was.
And
Was
all incomes have been renewed
Yeah.
Right.
through that period of time that were instituted prior.
But if we put an all income tax on the ballot, it's not something that's been passed in Ohio.
But
since
what are the
earned income tax has
demographics,
come
though,
out.
of the communities that have done the earned
The
income?
thing, the demographics of the community that have income taxes that are most like us have all income taxes, but the caveat being all of them passed their
True.
taxes before
It was
earned
earned.
was a choice. If you look at Bexley, Bexley has a 0.75% on all. Wyoming, down by Cincinnati, has 1.25 on all. Perrysburg up by Toledo is either half or 3/4 on all. It's one of the, I can't remember which it is. the top of my head, but they all predated,
Earned as a possibility.
when there was a possibility. Yeah, honestly, in the last 10 years, there haven't been very many districts with demographics like ours that have tried either. You know, in some ways, we are kind of in uncharted territory for things that have been done over the last 10 years.
What about Lincoln County schools?
They're about half and half, as far as.
Depending on the age
They
of
have them
them,
or they
essentially
don't have
probably if
them,
they're
or-
old ones, they're
No,
all.
as far as the one, there are 5 that have them,
Uh-huh.
and again, Southwest Licking, Licking Valley are both, they have all, because they predated, Newark and Johnstown, I believe, have earned, theirs are newer. North Fork, I can't remember, again, I don't remember off the top of my head which one they have. But again, a lot of that is the predated, and you also, with Newark, their demographic is so much different than ours, that there's not a whole lot of difference in the two bases. And it really is theirs is much more of a lower income senior issue between the earned and the all than it is with us.
What percentage of our senior population is relatively low income?
I have.
I know. That's why I asked.
So if we look at probably better look at the IRS data, which really, that only covers the 43023 zip code. It does not include the portion of the districts in 43055. Of the 5,740 federal returns that were filed, the number of elderly returns, there were 1,730 out of the 5,740. Of those 1,730, 550 had under $50,000 of income. So about a third were under $50,000 of income, 2/3 were over $50,000 of income. The income rate, and again, the ranges are not equal, so it's going to be distorted a little. But if you look over 100,000, 630 of the 1,730 were over over $100,000 of income.
More questions? Comments?
Nope.
Let's,
Okay.
on the amendment.
This
or
is to
on the
remove
withdrawal.
12.02 from the agenda. Ms. Dees? Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. James?
Aye.
Okay. And that leaves 12.03.
So moved.
Second. Oh. Second.
Who's, Amy, do you second?
No, me.
Yeah, you checked it.
Discussion?
Let's pass it.
Let's do it.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye. Thank you.
And the last item is 12.05, the resolution for fund transfer.
So moved.
Second.
That was you, Fred, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this.
That's Jen. with the-
Sorry. You know, my hearing aids don't always work properly. This would be to allow fund transfer out of the operating fund to the food service fund, in amount not to exceed the June bill here, which we'll be getting in a couple weeks. Remember last year, the June bill was a little under $9,000. I just expect it to be in that same range. You know, could be a little more, could be a little less, but to allow us to do a transfer to come. And again, this is primarily because of the pay for fees that are running down the balance in the food service fund.
Questions?
Ms. Deeds? Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Dr. Cornman?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye. Is there a motion?
To make a motion to move into executive session? I'll
Consider
second
the-
Amy's motion.
Consider the employment of public employees of district.
Ms. Deeds? Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Cornman?
Aye.
Thanks.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye. Motion to, oh, that's all.
No action to follow.
There will be no action to follow.